Okay, what about, how will the public be able to view what we're talking about though?
I am going to work on that now, so I can
Right.
share it. Yeah, I just want to hold up the meeting.
Okay,
Mhm.
Okay, well, with that, I guess we'll go ahead and get started with the November 3rd Electric Utility Advisory Board meeting. Suhei, would you please take roll call?
Yes. Ibrahim Shahub, not here for the roll call. Matthew Portilla,
Present.
Ramsey Stevens, not here for the roll call. Ryan O'Blander,
Here.
David Sims.
Here.
All right.
Okay, thank you. And who did I call last time to do the pledge? I think it might have been Matt. But
Yes, it was me.
all right, David, would you do us the honor, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Okay. So everyone's put their right hand over their chest and ready. Okay, so I pledge allegiance
flag.
to the flag
To flag
of the United
of the
States
United
of
States of
America
America
and to the republic for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one nation,
one nation,
indivisible, under God, with liberty and
with
justice
liberty
for
and
all.
justice for all.
All right, thank you, David.
Okay.
Okay, are there any additions, deletions, reordering for this agenda?
Yeah, I'd like to, I don't know if it's on here. I would like to just mention, Commissioner McVoy has two proposals that were discussed at the city commission meeting, the last city commission meeting. He's got an in-community solar program and a conservation program that he was proposing.
Okay. Did
And
you
if
have
that's
an
not on the
agenda?
agenda to be discussed, I'd like to just, for us to just talk about it.
Okay, do you have a copy of today's agenda?
I do not.
Okay, yeah, Suhei emailed everyone the agenda. It's also on the city website, but we are talking about the conservation program this evening. I don't know if we're tasked with discussing the community solar. I don't believe we are at this meeting, but that doesn't stop us from commenting about it later
Can
on.
I just, if it's not on the agenda, I'll just mention it when the time comes. I don't know like a lot of details about it.
Okay. I mean, yeah, we can talk about it, I'm sure, here. If it ever comes to the board, this would be the place to talk about it then as well.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I believe today is a workshop session since we do not have a quorum.
Yeah,
Correct.
I didn't think that we would actually be voting on anything today because from what I understand, I'm sure at Liberty will tell us that there's a deadline of February. And I don't think there's any expectation that we're going to be finalizing and voting on anything to today's meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. To give a synopsis, there were two items that Commissioner McVoy brought to the city commission agenda without staff involvement at all in the development of those two items. So it was a surprise to us as well. But one item had to do with developing a conservation program, which I know he's passionate about. And the second item had to do with developing a community solar program, which he's also passionate about, but is duplicative of something that we already have underway. But nonetheless, he brought it forward, which he has a right to do. So at this time, we're at the October 28th meeting, if I get the dates correct. The commission did vote in favor of having the energy conservation program addressed by the UAB, which is your group. So, and that's in line with what I had given you folks a heads up with or on at the last meeting, saying, hey, this is something that we're going to be asking you to work on, and it was formalized by that commission request. So that's where we're at. The item with respect to community solar.
Hang on 1 second.
Yep.
Are we going to have a presentation on this right now, or are we going to just discuss this during new business? Because I still think we have some housekeeping stuff like minutes and whatnot before we get.
Well,
to new
yeah,
business.
we can do it during the business. I was just giving an update on what the background of what took place. That
Okay.
the solar community solar program that was not approved we were not directed to go work on that. So that's where we're at on that. That doesn't mean it might not happen in the future, but that's where it's at right now. The charge, if you will, was to go work on conservation.
Correct.
So we'll come back to that.
All right, great. So there are no presentations. I don't know, are there any public comments?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Do we have the minutes that were sent to us from the last meeting?
No, those minutes are not, have not been sent as of yet.
Okay, yeah, I was just double checking. Okay, so that was easy. We have no minutes to approve. We'll just tackle that at the next meeting.
So hey, where are we on those minutes? Are they not done, or they just weren't sent yet?
They're not completed as of yet, but they will be.
Okay.
All right, so that part was easy. All right, let's move on to new business. Development of recommendations for electric utility conservation program. So Ed, would you like to give us a bird's eye view of what this program should have components of? I mean, I'm sure you have something prepared that what P&L is doing in other municipalities in Florida and best practices and things like that, correct?
No, I don't.
Okay.
And I likely won't. For this reason, and I don't mean to be flip about it, but the commission is looking clearly for the advisory board's recommendations on what should be in a conservation program. So this is something that was driven by Commissioner McVoy and a large number of public comments in support of having some kind of a program. And I think there's a feeling that that the utility doesn't want a program. We've been very clear in saying, hey, you just have to, you can have any program you want, you just have to come up with a way to pay for it. So what I would prefer to do is to not have staff act in any way as a filter of items that the board or the community would like to see in a program. So my suggestion was that you all, and you may even want to get the public involved, maybe have some public workshops and meetings, and get ideas from the public as to what things you would like to have in a conservation program. There are certainly many of them out there that you can use. So it's, by the way, it's not unusual for utilities to have conservation programs. It's not unusual at all. So I would not suggest that anything that we should not do it. What I'm saying is the ideas should come from the floor, if you will, and that they should be documented as things you would like to see. And then maybe you may want to force rank them from your highest priority to lowest priority. What I've suggested is that in one-on-ones and in public is that a process like that take place. I'm very sensitive to putting the utility in a position where people could somehow say that we somehow filtered the ideas or didn't bring forward all the ideas. So I want to make sure that any idea that every group has be brought forward. What I have suggested is a path, one of which was to have this group engaged, which I broached at the last meeting, was that, hey, we'd be coming to you to ask you for something like this. The second part of that was for you to come up with a list of all of the ideas, and then you have to start quantifying them. So for example, if we say, hey, we want to give a rebate to people who install a high efficiency refrigerator, pick anyone, and say, okay, well, what would you like that rebate to be? And how many of them would you like to give out? Is it unlimited? Is it limited? Is it in numbers? Does it apply to any customer? For example, would it apply to the college, one of the schools? Would it apply to residential customers, commercial customers? Only certain customers by some economic demographic? Whatever your suggestions are. And I'm not going to put limits on you. That I want, the group should bring those ideas forward, because this is what should be ultimately delivered to the commission is your work product. What it is that you as representatives of the community would like to see in a program. Once you put some bounds on it, we can then turn it over to our rate making consultants who can then try to figure out, well, okay, this is what that could cost using some statistical methodology. And to say, let me throw out some crazy examples just to help guide the discussion. Let's say, for example, you say, hey, we want to give anybody who buys a new refrigerator, $50, whatever that number is. You can decide what the number to be. I would then like our rates consultant, which is Leidos, to say, okay, based on what we know of in similar markets, this is how many refrigerators you might have to pay out on in a given year. And this is how much money you would need to support that program or something like that. Some kind of a grading, mechanism. And what I would also suggest is that as we develop the program, is that recognition that, well, the program doesn't run itself. There's no staff here to do this. They don't exist. I'm here in the evening now having this conversation, but there's no time in my day to go and do this. This is all new stuff that we haven't done. So we need to create the governance. Well, who's going to manage the program? Who's going to, how do we determine who gets the $50? So for example, if you say it has to be a residential or commercial or school customer, okay, well, we have to have an application. So we have to have applications, and somebody has to review the application. And somebody says, well, how do you get paid? Is it because you gave us a receipt, or did we have to go to the premises and actually see that the device was installed? Or is it just tell us you did it and we send you $50? All those types of things. And then over time, we have to be able to document everything well. And so because this is going to be, in this particular case, it would involve giving money out to other people, right? So we'd have to have obviously controls in place to say, well, who did we give it to, and why, and where's the backup, and was there actually a refrigerator? Did we see it? We have to, all of that has to be figured out. Or if it's, say, we're going to give you rebates to install an air conditioner. Okay, did you actually install it? Did it meet the efficiency requirements? If you decide as a group that you want efficiency requirements, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Whatever. So all of that governance, that infrastructure needs to be created. If you go and say, well, we want there to be some kind of a means test, meaning it's driven towards certain economic gradations in the community. Well, what do we mean by that? Does that mean that we're going to be collecting people's income tax returns? We do that. How do we determine what people, if you have an income test, meaning that it's only eligible to people above or below or at certain incomes, how do we pick them? So how is that done? That all has to be developed. So you need infrastructure to do that. And then what legal documents go along with this stuff when you hand somebody a check? In other words, did they tell you they were going to install it and you paid them on that basis, or do you wait till it's installed and you go out and do an inspection? And how when they get the payment, how large should the payment be, or how small should it be? And is it a credit on their utility bill, or is it a flat out check that they're given? All of those details have to be developed to have a program. And then if in some of the items, if the perception is that they somehow save the utility money, for example, or some people have said, gee, you can do some of these things and make a profit. So, okay, I don't know how we'd make a profit, but how do we measure and verify that we actually did that? Because if part of the justification of some element of the program is that we're going to save some money as a utility by doing it, or let alone that we're going to make some kind of profit, well, we would think that we would want to have a mechanism to actually measure and verify that, to go back to the community maybe annually and say, this is how much we actually saved by doing this. What were the savings? Were they greater or lower than the costs? So there's a lot of this back end administration. So there's nobody here on staff to do all of that. So that infrastructure has to be created.
Okay.
And that comes at a cost too.
I have a question about that particular point. If this conservation program was to go into effect, let's say it was brought forward to the commission and the pricing and everything all just worked out, but the management of the program was going to be an issue. Would there be plans to hire someone from staff, or should this conservation program be designed where it wouldn't really require too much staff oversight?
My suggestion would be not to limit your ideas at least initially by the cost of implementation.
Okay.
I think that you, in all fairness to the community and the spirit in which the ideas came forward, I mean, on one hand, I could say there's an element that doesn't care what it costs. They believe that this is, and I want to represent all sides of the discussion. I'm not saying I endorse any of these ideas, right? What I'm just saying, here's the picture of what you want to be able to address. There's an element of the population who feels that this is a basic necessity, that the cost to manage it, to implement it, to run it is not a relevant matter, right? You may or may not agree with that, but there's a constituency that I believe believes that. At the other end of the spectrum, there's probably a constituency that says, well, wait a second, what's this going to cost us? So at the moment, I would focus more on coming with all of the ideas. And later on, if you want to apply some screening in terms of difficulty to implement, timing and cost and ultimate payback, if you even want to do that, then you would address that later on. But first I would concentrate on, my suggestion would be to concentrate on getting all of the ideas on the table. Now, fortunately, unlike landing on the moon, we're not the first ones that have done this, right? So there are plenty of really, really good examples out there. The FPL program is an excellent one in terms of, I'm not sure if it's excellent in terms of efficacy. I'm sure it's excellent in terms of the documentation that's out there on it, things you can copy. I think that Orlando Utilities Commission has a very well-documented program on their website. And that the OUC, and there's numbers of others around the state. Those are certainly not the only ones. What I particularly like about the OUC one is because of the unique relationship we have through the supplemental power agreement, they are more willing to share details of their program than anybody else might be. So for example, I'm sure if you rang the doorbell at FP&L and you say, look, I'd like to take a week or two of your time, or days of your time, or hours of your day, whatever it's going to be, to probe you on how you arrived at certain decisions, FPL is just going to hang up and say, they're not interested in talking to us, right? They're an investor-owned entity, and we're not even their customer, other than on the transmission side. So the utility wouldn't be interested. But OUC, we have that really good contractual relationship. So I know, because I've already broached the subject with them, they're okay with sharing information on their program. And for that matter, I've actually said, hey, can we copy and paste, right? Of course, we can't copy and paste the whole back-end administration of it, but we can copy and paste what, how it looks on the website, the ideas they have, how much they pay for devices or certain equipment. For that matter, if you want to be competitive with FPL or have a project that's similar to FPL's, you may want to see, well, how much does FPL give for an air conditioner, and at what SEER rating do they do it, or how much do they give for a refrigerator, or for light bulbs, or for windows, things like that. So I would copy liberally from other people's, but my suggestion would be to have the list being all inclusive, so that there's no member of the public who could come back to the group and say, hey, you left off this thing that was really important to me, right?
Right. And all great points. And one thing that I think we need to probably get the actual commission's thoughts on, I mean, we probably each individually have to reach out to our own commissioner. But I mean, we do have the historic preservation, which I know gets in the way of a lot of times they are not in agreement with what you can do. I mean, many times upgrades to a house, efficiency, and what is permitted through the Historic Preservation Board do not agree. And there's been a big outcry of recent window changes, and I'm not sure the exact particulars of it, but I mean, that's a potential issue we could run into if the Historic Preservation, I'm not familiar with their exact requirements, but which one supersedes the other one also should be a question. And that's really not something we can respond to. We can answer. It's for our elected officials to do too. So Just want to keep that at the top of everyone's mind as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because we may even need a legal opinion as to, what. So the Historic Preservation Board, for example, you can't change your windows without their approval, right? End of discussion, right? But
and like, there's a vast majority of the land area of the city is under a Historic Preservation Board. So, I mean, before we start pushing too much effort into this, it might be something really basic that we're going after, rather than some of the hard hitting stuff like insulation and, incentivizing getting rid of window units, which to me personally would be the biggest bang for the buck, rather than light bulbs and small stuff. But just a thought.
yeah, it's very, very, very good point. I think I think there's a line here, or that we probably want to keep an eye on or be mindful of. My suggestion to the group would be, if and try to determine early on, is the purpose of a conservation program to just give people money, or is the purpose of a conservation program to drive CO2 and greenhouse gas reductions at the lowest cost possible? So the greatest reduction at the lowest cost, right? In terms of force ranking ideas. So which gives you the biggest bang for the buck? So is the goal of the program to lower greenhouse gas emissions, or is the goal of the program just to give people money to do something?
Good points. I mean, if you want, I can start actually reading out loud the resolution sections. And it's quite vague, but it gives some direction. If you don't mind, I can start reading that.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so I'm not going to read the entire document, but starting with section 1 on line 25, it says the City Commission hereby directs the City of Lake Worth Beach Electric Utility Advisory Board to work expeditiously to develop a comprehensive approach for residential energy efficiency based on industry-wide best practices. Section 2, the City Commission hereby directs that the developed comprehensive approach be of benefit both to residents and to the electric utility, with benefits being defined in the broadest sense, for example, including state or national level recognition, increased future eligibility for diverse funding sources, etc. Section 3, the City Commission also directs that in developing a comprehensive approach to energy efficiency, the EUAB evaluate all available best practice technologies and policies, including but not limited to rebate programs for ceiling insulation, ductwork improvements, AC efficiency upgrades, appliance efficiency upgrades, smart thermostats, window replacements, residential energy rating and disclosure policies, energy audits, educational programs, and demand-side management technologies and policies. Section 4, the City Commission recommends that the EUAB evaluate funding the comprehensive energy efficiency through a small public benefit charge. Additional funding through philanthropy, green bonds, and federal grants can also be evaluated. Section 5, the City Commission directs the Electric Utility Administration to submit recommendations to the City Commission on how to best implement an energy efficiency/energy conservation program that meets the unique needs of the Lake Worth Beach utility and its ratepayers no later than February 15th, 2022. Section 6, once a residential program has been developed and implemented, the City Commission further directs the EUAB to develop a parallel program to support commercial customers. So it seems like sections 1 through 4 kind of giving the overview of what they want us to consider. And they listed many things back in section 3, like educational programs and energy audits, things that are a little bit lighter weight in terms of what we can do, but then the heavier things about actually giving rebates. So I'm not sure exactly. I said demand side management technologies and policies as well. So a lot of questions that I have. And it's kind of it's a very comprehensive program they want us to build, but at the same time, a very small window of opportunity to build it. And I remember I was watching the last electric commission meeting about the date. If we needed more time, we can always postpone that date. Is that correct?
Yeah, I suggested that the date, at least from my perspective, it's my opinion that what they've asked for cannot be done by February 15th. And I stand by that opinion. Of course, they said, well, go ahead and do, start. That's effectively what they said. But I don't think that the group could come there empty handed. I think realistically speaking, my plate is full, and I got vacation in the past 2 years I haven't used. And I've got my son's wedding coming up in December. So, I'm going to go do that wedding. So I'm not substituting it. So that realistically.
I do have a question real
Yeah.
quick before we move on. For section 5, there's a difference between the EUAB and the Electric Utility Administration.
Yeah.
Or is that your team, Ed? Is that what
Yes.
they're referring to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
but
making sure.
there is nobody here on my team who can do this. I'm the only one. So, I'm swamped now with things that I have to get done, like I said. So my point is that the February 15th date in my mind is not achievable. Not only is it not achievable for things that you might need me to do and weigh in on what I need to add to the program, which is what administration will take to run this thing after you've come up with all the things that you think you want to implement.
And I'm sure we're going to have questions that need answers that we can't get during the meeting. It seems like if I were to ask you right now, can you give me the average size square foot and age of all the residential customers whose bills are over 1,000 kilowatt hours per month? That takes some time and effort to actually come back to the next meeting with those results.
Well, so that's a really good question. So for example, I'll say again, that is a good question. That is something that would be great to be able to do. However, I don't think you're going to find a utility in the country. If you asked FPL that question, I don't think they could answer. However, a small utility like us might be able to go put that together, but that's very data intensive and difficult to do. So what you'd have to do is to pull up the billing records, then go into the property appraiser's website and household by household, pull up their square footages. I've actually suggested to Commissioner McVoy that we in fact do that in the future, that we should begin to utilize big data, that we should take a data, and you're a data guy, right, Ryan? You're an environment, right? So I suggested that we should be able, even if we have to pay for it, we should get a data dump from PAPA on conditioned square footage in every premise in the city, and then match that up against utility bills, and then look at energy use per square foot and identify the outliers. So, but actually doing that, there's nobody here who can do that. That person with those skill sets does not exist on this staff. So that would have to be handed over to our rates consultants at their hourly rates to go and do that.
Mm-hmm.
That resource doesn't exist. So can it be done? Yeah, sure. By February 15th? I doubt it. And at what cost? Okay.
Yeah,
So
I mean, if someone on this board would like to volunteer to take on that task to do, to compile data and then present it at the next meeting, but that would be an undertaking. It's a lot of clicking. I'm not sure if a request like that can be made in one specific data dump from the Palm Beach Property Appraiser's office, though.
Actually, I think it can be, and I think you have to pay for it, but I think they can do it.
Okay.
I suspect that they can, because they have the data, because it's in because not for this purpose. On occasion, I've looked at PAPA, for example, when we get a high bill complaint. Staff has sometimes gone into PAPA, look up the address, pull up the square footage, and say, wow, that house is kind of small to have that kind of electric bill. What's going on there? As a matter of fact, Commissioner Boy was heavily involved. This is where some of his ideas came from. Heavily involved with an account that we had in the village of Palm Springs, or that was the county, I believe. And where they were into us for like almost $5,000 in unpaid bills. And it was electric, water, and sewer, or electric and water. And it was insane. And their energy use was was crazy. And we couldn't understand it. And Commissioner McVoy, we sent auditors to the property, and Commissioner McVoy went there himself with his wife, because it was English was a second language for the family in the home, to try to figure out what was going on there. So he put a lot of his own personal time, and as it we, I wouldn't be surprised if he put every bit of 20 or 24, 30 hours, work hours into that, as did our staff trying to figure it out. So we know that type of data exists, but we'd have to get somebody who's tech savvy to get it and dump it into a spreadsheet, and then, extracting the billing information from our AMI system or from the city's ERP system is extremely difficult. Possible? Yeah, but a lot of work,
Okay. You did bring up a good point, though, that you touched on with sending auditors to the person's house and looking at the water and everything. That's one thing I don't see in this resolution. It doesn't mention water at all. And I know that on our billing, we have combined billing, electric, water, sewer, sometimes, special trash pickups and whatnot. But is this board not touching the topic of water conservation? It's only electric.
That's our purview.
No,
Actually,
it's not, no.
It's not. This is the Electric Utility Advisory Board. There is no Water Utility Advisory Board.
Correct.
However, having said that, the commission has expressed an interest, because I brought forward when this was brewing and realized, hey, this is going to be a ton of work. Hey, we need a person here, and I've coined the description of the position, of the title, as the Energy Conservation and Greenhouse Gas Reduction Manager, or if you want to say Sustainability Manager, but that gets into sustainability on the other side of the building here, where I'm sitting here in the office. But because the commission is also concerned with water conservation, and water conservation, or water, does have a significant cost element, which is the cost of pumping the water. Right, all of the water that comes out of your faucet has been pumped to get there. It has an electric component to it. So they want to do water conservation as well. Although this conservation program is aimed at electric utility items. Now, if you have water conservation ideas, I wouldn't say throw them out. I would say you should probably keep those as well, and bring those forward. I don't think they'd say, gee, you went off on the wrong charge, but I would say that the majority of the work ought to revolve around electric utility conservation. But if you have water conservation ideas, bring them forward. It would probably be helpful if I give you some background on what was done in the city a decade ago, because I think it's helpful. So if you think this is a point in the meeting where it might be helpful for me to discuss that, I'll do a dump on you in terms of information that I have from a decade ago.
Go ahead.
Are you talking about the energy audits, Ed?
Sort of. So it included energy audits. And by the way, to the issue of energy audits specifically, we do those today. We have 2 people on staff who do energy audits. So when customers request an audit, or when customers are complaining about a high bill situation, we do have 2 people on staff. These are non-degreed union positions that will go out to the premises and actually do an audit. And we are also in the process of bringing on, or we're going to be providing online, an energy audit tool that you can go through yourself. So a homeowner could log into the website or go on the website and then use this tool to do their own energy audit of their home or small business. And if they need help, we would offer a guided or concierge service where we would do it on the phone. So we would take control of the keystrokes and ask them questions to get it to input into the model to guide them through it. If necessary, we could go to the premises, but since the advent of COVID, we have not been inside people's residences. It's very rare that we will go inside a residence because of COVID now. Now that's going to change. Eventually we'll be, hopefully COVID will be in our rear mirror, and we'll be able to do that.
Just quick question. that is not their full-time position, correct? It's part of their tasks that they do throughout the day. It's kind of a small percentage of their tasks.
No, it's their full, it's
Okay.
in their full-time job. And what we did
Okay.
was, because of COVID, because we weren't going into premises in person, we assigned them other duties. For example, these two folks made 8,000 or 9,000 phone calls to people who were late on their bills to get them in touch with assistance programs and actually help them through the assistance process with the applications.
Okay.
But their primary
so
job is this.
Okay, perfect. So it seems like if there's a minor shift with regards to an efficiency program, you might be a small amount of resources that you have staff to allocate, if it's just I don't want to commit you to anything, but it sounds like there might be a mechanism for some small, sources, or if they're running rebates in their, within the part of their day, it's a possibility.
Yeah, that's why they're here. So here's the history of how they came to be here. So as far back from what we can tell anecdotally in the conversations with staff members, for example, our former revenue protection manager, Joel Rutsky, works for us part-time. He's retired, but he works for us a few hours a month or a few hours a week part-time, managing some programs for us. So he was here at the time when the program was more robust. I think he arrived here probably 2010 or 2011, and was on staff within what was the conservation group. So the city, between 2009 and 2012, did in fact have a conservation program. That conservation program involved a staff of about 5 or 6 people, which was a manager, I believe an admin, and then and staff that would also do audits. I think there might have been 3 auditors at the time. I know that when I got here 4 years ago, there were 3 auditors. One is subsequently retired, but if you go back to 2009, 2012, in that bracket, there was a group with about 6 people in it. At that time, there was a surcharge on everybody's electric bill of $0.0195. So it's just slightly less, it's 0.195 cents per kilowatt hour. So it was roughly 0.2 cents of a kilowatt hour was a surcharge, as I understand it, that was on everybody's bill. And that surcharge, and I mean everybody's bill, developed a pot of money which was used to pay staff and also pay rebates under the program. There are actually grants. The program had 2 aspects to it, as I've been told. It had rebates, which was, hey, if you bought a certain appliance, you get a certain dollar value check issued to you. But I don't know if it was an actual check or if it was a credit on your bill. I suspect it was a check, and you had to produce some kind of a receipt. The second part of the program, or rather the rebate program, the rebates were paid for not by the city. They were paid for by the Florida Municipal Power Agency under a program that was available only to members of the All Requirements Project, what was referred to as the ARP. At the time, the city was a member of the FMPA ARP project, All Requirements Project. And for those of you that may not be aware of that, the All Requirements Project is a project that's run by the Municipal Power Agency, what basically happens is the people who go into the program turn over all of their energy procurement and future supply planning to the FMPA. And their units, to the extent that they have a power plant in their own city, it is then dispatched by the ARP for the benefit of the ARP as a whole. Meaning that if you have a very efficient unit, it's going to run a lot, and you're going to get reimbursed for running it. If you have a very inefficient unit, it's going to run very little, but when it does run, you're going to make a little bit of money from it. So you're really, what you're doing is your assets are producing power for the pool, with the concept being that the most efficient unit always runs first, the least efficient unit runs last, but you're in the pool. You're in this little club, if you will. So the city was a part of that entity. It had joined that entity in 2003 and remained in it until the end of 2013. But while the city was in that program, conservation rebates were paid for by the ARP. That was a benefit that was paid for by the ARP. Money was collected from ARP members out of their power costs. It was in the budget, and then it was allocated out in the form of rebates. That's my understanding. The city would no longer be eligible for that because we are no longer in the ARP. So we would not be eligible. And either way, in 2012, the whole program was terminated by the city. In 2000, the other thing that was present between 2009 and 2012 was a program of grants. The grants were paid for by the surcharge that the city applied to everybody's bill. That's my understanding. So that generated a pot of money that paid for the staff and it paid for the grants. The grants were awarded for actually implementing something. So if you installed the installation or you installed a central air conditioning system of a certain SEER rating, or you installed windows or did weather stripping or you replaced doors, you could get dollars under the grant program. And there, anecdotally, and I don't know if the records are still here, there are customers out there who got thousands of dollars in grants to do this work. And in order to get the grant, my understanding is that there was some sort of a means test, is that it was targeted at people with at the lower end of the income ranges. What those breakpoints are or how they were determined, I have no idea. But that's what I'm hearing, is that it was income, it was targeted at certain income levels. It was also targeted at residential homeowners, not residential tenants, and not commercial customers, not schools, not the college. So while everybody was paying, so for example, if you're the school or the college, you're paying substantial amounts that were going into this program and then going into grants and paying staff to administer the program. Sometime in 2012, and there is a resolution that we can find where the program was terminated by vote of the commission. The reasons why, we don't know. We don't know. There's staff that thinks they know, but that could be hyperbole. But there's nothing that I've seen or anybody can point to that says, oh yeah, here's the discussion that took place. Here's what each commissioner said at the time and why they voted to shut it down, but they did in fact shut it down. So when the program was shut down, and this is where the details are fuzzy, there was a pot of money. So if you look in the city's financials, there is a fund called the Conservation Fund, and the dollars were in this fund. So the dollars were not just scattered to the wind in the city's budgets, they were specifically in this conservation fund. And the staff was paid out of the fund. Sometime after the program was shut down, staff withered down. Where they went or why they went, or I don't believe anybody was laid off, but staff withered down. When I got here, there were 3 people in conservation. They were the boots on the ground doing the audits. And there was the manager. By that time, Joel had risen through the ranks to become manager of conservation, but he was really running the meter shop. And at the same time managing what was left of the conservation group. And then of course, Joel retired probably a year and a half ago now. We continued to draw down the conservation fund without refilling the bucket, right? Because we were no longer collecting a surcharge until the fund ran dry. And then I absorbed those people into the utilities operating budget with really no way to pay for it, which is where we're at today. But they're still doing the audits for free, but there's no specific surcharge to cover the cost. We're just eating it, if you will, out of our total revenues. So that's where we're at with the program today. So we do have 2 auditors on staff that can and still do residential energy audits. And the former manager of the group, at least until a year and a half ago, was working for us part-time and has indicated that he would be willing as a part-time employee to put some time in and certainly share his experience and help in this effort. But he's definitely not going to come back full-time. He has no interest in doing that. Not sure if that helps.
Yeah, no, it does help. So eventually the fund just kind of withered out as well, because it was paying for staff, and then the money ran out. We still have staff, and then we're doing it out of our costs, is what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. So what?
Like if I were to request an energy audit of my own home, they would just put me in on the schedule. Someone would come over here and
Yes.
spend like an hour, and then write up something and leave me with what do I get after the audit's done?
I've actually not looked to the details of it myself, but my understanding is they give you some kind of a report or walk through it verbally with you. But there is some kind of a document they give you. Now, what I can tell you is that having run a private consultancy that was in this business for large industry and large universities nationwide, I can tell you that if I'll use a term, ASHRAE level 1, ASHRAE level 2, or investment grade audit, IGA. These are all terms in the industry. The audits that we're doing at the residential are none of those. And the staff that we have could not do any of those. So the audit report that you would get for your residents, my suspicion is probably not much more sophisticated than you could think of yourself by walking around the house and saying, yeah, I ought to close that window. I ought to reset the thermostat. I ought to put insulation in my attic, right? That type of stuff. I ought to replace that old air conditioner. I should get rid of that window shaker. You yourself have said, right? Things like that.
Got it. Yeah, I did find a historical document by Googling for Lake Worth rebate program. And
yep.
There's a page that popped up that did list out actual individual items and the price points for residential and commercial, eligible system size for refrigerators and freezers, everything must be Energy Star rated, things like that. It doesn't really go into details of how it was implemented. There's a name, the contact name, but there really isn't, I think this is all outdated. All the links go to the old website that don't exist anymore.
Yeah, what's the name?
The name of the website?
No, the name of is there a person anywhere?
Oh, the name is listed as Christine Davis.
So she's still here. She's one of the two people that's here.
Oh, okay.
She's one of these auditors, one of our auditors.
No, I'm sorry, Ed.
I'm sorry.
Let me correct you. It's Christy Pym, who's one of the auditors.
Oh.
Christine Davis actually is no longer with the city.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
When I heard the word Christy, I said, oh, maybe that's her maiden name or something like that. So
yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I retract that.
Okay, I mean, I can read off the summary they have here. It's basically, it says the City of Lake Worth Utilities, in conjunction with the Florida Municipal Power Agency, offers a variety of rebates to residential and commercial customers for upgrading to energy-saving equipment. Rebates are available for the installation of energy efficiency air conditioners, heat pumps, clothes washers, dishwashers, programmable thermostats, refrigerators, freezers, and insulation. All equipment must be Energy Star rated to qualify for the rebates. Commercial customers are eligible for a limited number of rebates compared to residential customers. Some equipment must meet additional energy efficiency standards listed on the program website. Rebate applications can be found on the program website and must be submitted to the utility with a copy of the proof of purchase within 90 days of the equipment purchase date. Rebates will be paid to customer in the form of a credit on customer's monthly utility bill. Grants of up to $3,000 are also available to low-income customers. See details on the program website. Lake Worth Utilities customers are also eligible for a free energy savings kit. The kit contains 1 high-efficiency shower head, 2 faucet aerators, weather stripping for doors, insulation pads for switch and outlet covers, an air conditioner filter whistle, and an energy saving tips booklet. Interested customers should bring a copy of a utility bill to the Lake Worth Utilities Administration Building. And then it lists the contact information and the website that doesn't exist. But it is possible I might be able to dig up this website using the Wayback Machine to see if it was spidered and details.
Can you just can you scan and email that to all of us? Because I'll give that to Joel, because Joel's going to go look to see what we have, right, from years ago, if there's anything in the archives here. Because I think that's a very good starting point for the group. In other words, I don't think we all have to go get an additional college degree in energy conservation. Probably the quickest and best thing to do is to make sure that of all the things you put on the list, you at least put on the list things that were done in the past and things that are done by other utilities. So that list that you just read, from the research I've done, is very common in the industry. And what we need to do, I would suggest that you do, is start to list what that rebate is. For example, if you look on an FPL website, or if you look on the OUC website, which are probably going to be the easiest ones, and they also happen to be, by the way, Florida market, right? So it would be helpful. I would think that the FPL numbers are very relevant because they surround us. And they also have lots of very, very bright staff, and all of their programs have to be vetted and approved, by the Florida Public Service Commission. And there's probably no shortage of people who intervene, and expert witnesses that they bring in all of their conservation program development, meaning that there's whatever they've arrived at, it's unlikely that we're going to come up with something that's even better, because we just don't have the resources to go do something more in depth than they've probably done. So that would be.
I put the link inside the chat. I'm not sure if you can click on it and open up a browser because your screen's being shared, or if you just want to share that with everyone in the group.
It does work. Yep, it works. I just clicked on it.
Okay.
Let's see, does it? Yeah, it works. I just need to make sure I save it, bookmark it. Well, it worked for me anyway. I don't know if everybody else is able to do it.
Yeah, for the people who are probably watching at home online later, just Google Lake Worth Rebate Program. It's going to be one of the top results. And the website I was looking at was openei.org.
Yeah, I'll ask Joel about this.
I mean, they also have different things with water. I remember at one point in time, there was the rain barrel giveaway or rain barrel credits. There was a different program where people could submit to get rain barrels. I'm not sure if they actually installed them on the property or just gave them barrels and kits to say, hey, have at it. I remember that was one thing they did a while back.
You know what? This is like a spoof website. This doesn't actually take you to Lake Worth's program. This takes you to somebody who would seek to develop a program for Lake Worth. This is not, from what I can tell, this is not Lake Worth specific.
The link I gave you?
Yeah.
No, I'm looking at all Lake Worth utilities. I wish I can share my screen and see what I'm looking at.
So can you let me share the screen?
I believe you can. Go ahead and try it, yeah.
Okay, share screen. Yes, continue. Which screen am I looking at? All right, do you see my screen? Is this the same thing that you opened up?
Yeah, but let me see. I'm looking for.
It lists all the different.
I don't see a summary tab on what I opened up.
The summary is down here near the bottom, just in a paragraph format. And then the Christine Davis contact information.
Okay. Just a warning for anybody. You see the references where it says desire. Be careful how you spell that. That's actually a very, very good website to go to if you spell it correctly, which is DSIRE. I've been aware of this site for over 20 plus years. We had some staff members running to HR and saying, I didn't mean to. But it's a very good industry website for energy conservation. I think it's actually, I think it's a North Carolina state website, if I remember correctly. It's very good.
Right. Well, very
So-
cool. So this definitely is like a good starting point. And I know that we all can go home with homework assignments, basically, doing the research with other nearby utilities and like you said, comparing them with what we have here as a starting point. I'm not sure about these kits because everything here in this list is more about energy conservation, but in the kit they're giving away water related items.
Yeah.
So like
There-
shower heads, air readers, things like that.
We can check with Joel to see, where those kits are, if they're still here, and what they cost. If the group thinks that you want to offer something like that, if you do, one thing that I would suggest is that we not have them come here. What I would almost suggest, if they're interested in that, that they just basically email us that they want it, and maybe we, somehow make arrangements to get it to. Because I don't think we want everybody coming here to get something. That's a lot of one-on-one contact. Might be something where we maybe go to the home and drop it off. It could be thousands, but that's something maybe we got to mail them or something. But I have to give that some thought, because since we've been trying to focus on doing less and less business that requires people to come here in person for a reason.
Okay,
I'm
makes sense.
just talking out loud too. I have a thought on, I mean, in a perfect world, if everyone was the building owner and the ratepayer, a lot of these things would be very simple to implement. And there would be some vested interest in doing those things. I have, if you own the building, I have a high electric bill and you're the user in that building. I want to reduce that, and day to day, you'd make investments in that structure. The other thing we got to think of is, how do we get these landlord tenant owned properties, which I would venture to guess are probably on the less efficient side, as opposed to the, we don't have any pure data on this, so I'm just going to opine on this, but guess that the tenant occupied properties are probably going to be the biggest energy consumers on a square foot basis, if I had to guess, or use per use basis.
That makes sense. The owners don't pay the electric bill. I rent, my landlady pays the water, but we pay our own electric. So I guess they don't have much incentive to pay for energy, upgrade their structures to be more energy efficient when they're not the ones paying for stuff.
Correct. And then, I mean, maybe there might be a situation where they're looking to do it, and then they find out, they go into this whole rigmarole where they're in the historic preservation area, and there's just becomes too many encumbrances. And I just want to get this thought out there. In a perfect world, the simplest way to drive down erroneous consumption would be to do what's called the Kaguvian tax. And this is just a thought experiment for you guys right now. It's not a something that we're looking at, but if you raise rates and then you give that raised rate percentage back to everybody equally, in the form of a check, at the end of the day, or at the end of the year, or at the end of whenever the period is, people are going to say, do I want to pay this much? I'm okay with paying this much for utilities, or I'm going to use this check to go and make upgrades to my facility. And whatever the upgrade is to them, it's actually the simplest form of a carbon tax that anyone could think of.
What kind of a tax did you call that?
It's called a Kaguvian tax, and it's Pigou, Pigou. If you want to look it up, it's a really fascinating practice. The issue would be we'd run into if we implemented something like that, and as a ratepayer, if you got, as a tenant occupied ratepayer, you would just get a check back. You would see higher bills, but you would get a check back. Tenant owned, or owner occupied facilities would have the option to make that investment. And ultimately, it's the simplest, lowest cost way to implement anything that you're looking for to reduce it. And if you have a great facility that you say, hey, my house is great on power, it's great. You get a check back at the end of the period and say, okay, I'm going to use this to spend on groceries, or I'm going to go on a vacation, or do whatever you want with it. But your consumption is low enough to where you don't think about using those funds for making your consumption lower. So I don't really know where I'm going with that, but that is I don't want to think too small on this either. If we go to and say, the commission and say, we're going to give them shower heads and thermostats, is that really at the end of the day going to do the big future forward changes that we want to do? Or is it just going to be, an implementation, like you said, and reading the resolution notes, I think, I'm reading the resolution. I think, they're probably looking to us to try and build upon this. And to me, the steps toward increasing energy efficiency would be, making rules and regulations within the city that say you can't, if you're doing upgrades to a building, you got to get rid of that window shaker and put in some insulation and a central unit or a mini split, that a ductless system or whatever the system that meets it. Is if we start pulling out these mini splits or these window units and doing things like that, where you have a tighter envelope, the prices are going to go down. The rates that someone is paying, the consumption is going to go down. How we do from one point to the next is going to be, ultimately it's different between the two. That's where we have that disconnect. It's a forced savings plan. So that's just my thoughts out there. I didn't mean to kind of go off on
I think it's a great idea.
Philosophy of it.
At this point, we're just doing an idea generating session, and we're going to have to reconvene with more data, more ideas, and then we're going to have to have a ranking system of what we think is most important and whatnot. And then we will slowly, I'm not sure about expeditiously, but we'll slowly get to the maybe like the top 10 or something that could be easily implemented without too much staff involvement or without too much reaching out and relying on grants from outside sources. I don't know yet. It's pretty much, we have to take it upon ourselves to go out into the public and ask questions. I'm on social media and I talk to people all the time, and some of the comments are interesting. But when anything does come up about Lake Worth Beach utilities, 9 times out of 10 is a negative comment. And I know that is one thing that they're trying to change is the perspective. And sometimes these comments are coming from people who used to be customers that moved out but are still lingering in the message boards and Facebook groups and whatnot. So it's interesting to get those kind of perspectives. I even talked to solar installers who are probably really good at their job, but have no idea what they're talking about when it comes to the nuances of Lake Worth Beach systems. But that's what they're telling all their customers or potential customers. So there's probably, I'm trying to reread this resolution, but there's like when the one section where they say looking for state national level recognition, increase future eligibility for diverse funding sources, etc. I have to speak with the person who drafted this to see what they actually meant by that. Because if one of the goals is to win awards, we kind of would have to know what awards are out there to actually win, right? So things like that. This is pretty much going to be a fact-finding mission, and we can all come back with all our findings and chew them over and see how they play out. I know there are a couple of people here tonight, not here tonight, that submitted ideas to the board. Thank you, Suhei, for sharing those. And in particular, Ramsey had some interesting concepts that he wanted to bring forward, but he couldn't be here tonight. So we'll most likely be hearing from him at the next session.
Let me
So,
let me do this for the group. Let's first of all say that what you're going through right now is normal. In these exercises, there's typically at least 3 phases: storming, norming, and forming. And so you're in the storming phase right now, right? We all are. You know, the storming is kind of wandering around trying to figure out what it's supposed to do. Norming begins when you start to create the norms, start to put it together, and form is when you form the final ideas that you want to bring forward. So that's normal. But let me ask you a question. I'll go around the table, each one of them, and start with regards to whether you think our electric bills are higher or lower than they would be in FPL territory. So Matt, what's your impression? I'll start with Matt, just because you're in the top left-hand corner on my chart. Do you think our bills are higher or lower?
I think we have a perception issue. I mean, I think if you pulled out electric and showed someone a bill to bill on, you know, a similar size house across the street from each other, built on the same day, one was in, you know, FPL service territory and one was in Lake Worth utility service territory, and it was electric to electric, I think that would be pretty much parity. You might see a few dollars difference on a regular unit per unit basis when it comes to residential. That's my thoughts on it, you know, but when you add in sewer, water, and all the other things in there, I think people will start to say, oh, this is a huge bill.
Right.
And don't see all the separate, you know, little things that are in the same bill rather than one large bill.
Ryan, how about you? What are your thoughts? Do you think your bill at home is higher or lower than it would be if you live in FPL's territory?
Well, because I have a more modern house, it was built in 2003, concrete block construction, good insulation, things like that. And also I did a bunch of energy efficient upgrades on my house, and I have some shade trees. If you take the same exact, you know, house and trees and everything and put that in FPL territory, I would believe it'd be the same, if not a little bit higher in FPL. But I'm not sure about the franchise fees and whatnot that might go into it.
Mhm.
But when I talked to a neighbor who moved away from a nearby street, they were in an older house, and it was, I believe it was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. I'm not sure what year it was built, but probably like the 50s or 60s. And they had a little above ground pool and a little like a garage in the back that they did some work on. And they moved to a huge house out like in, I wouldn't say Wellington, but it's out there.
Mhm.
Wellington, Loxahatchee area, and they're in FPL territory. And they're like, oh, I can't believe, you know, how much less our electric bill is. It's, you know, the bigger house and, you know, vaulted ceilings, but it was new construction. It wasn't an older house. So
Right. That's not a good comparison, right?
it's not a good comparison. So when they moved, they're like, oh, we got a bigger house and our electric bill was lower, so therefore Lake Worth Beach charges too much. I'm like, well, you can't really compare the two, because I've spoken to other people who have bought multiple houses in the city, and their bills keep on improving every time they purchase a newer house with better insulation and you know, a tighter envelope. But if they're buying these older historical houses like the cottages and whatnot, then their bills are higher, just because of the building materials.
Right. So how about David? What do you think? If you for your home, you think if that same home was in FPL's territory, you would pay more or less?
okay, Ed, I rent a small apartment, and I'm one of those 10%. I pay $34 and change a month. I use very little electricity. So my bill at FP&L might be a little lower because their minimum is below ours. Like ours is 34. What's theirs, like 20 something or in the teens? They have a slightly lower minimum from what we've talked about. So mine might be a little bit lower, but for most people, we're on parity with FP&L, as you've mentioned before.
Yeah, so you've gotten a speech more recent than anybody else has. So to the minimum bill concept, we are currently at $31 and I believe $31.40. FPL just settled with as a part of their rate case, they'll be going from $8 and change as a minimum bill to $25 effective January 1, I believe. The answer with respect to our rates is that if you take 2 bills for the same home, let's say it's because I've been tracking this for homes between 800 to 1100 kilowatt hours a month. You take the bill that you get for electric in Lake Worth, and you put it side by side with the bill that you get from FPL, and you get out your pen and you write the check. So we're talking about the amount, the bottom of the bill that you're going to write. You're going to write. Lake Worth Beach bill is about 0.5% lower. Most people don't believe that, but it's fact, because I get FPL bills for homes in that dollar range, and I run that same amount of kilowatt hours through the Lake Worth Beach billing model, and lo and behold, the Lake Worth Beach bill is about 0.5% lower today. And starting sometime around, I believe, January 1, Lake Worth or FPL is going up between 5.5% to 6% higher. We've proposed some rate increases as well, but the rate increases that we propose would still have us below FPL. So that's the fact. So the reality is that I don't have enough years in my career, we collectively don't have enough years in our lives to correct this myth that's out there that's not based in fact. And there are simply just not enough people, if you want to call them influencers, on social media dispelling that myth. So the myth continues, even though it's not fact. Now, if you were talking about commercial, you'd shake your head in bewilderment to try to understand, why are we 20 to 30% higher than FPL already? In spite of that, people think that we're trying to lower commercial rates below, where they ought to be. The fact of the matter is that if it was not for the 3,000 plus commercial customers who are grossly overpaying to subsidize the residential customers, you'd have a huge problem here in Lake Worth. But that's not tonight's subject. The fact is that we are cheaper than FPL right now, and we've been cheaper than FPL since at least May. We got substantially to parity. We're at parity in 2018. Then a few months after that, FPL lowered the rate. We did not go lower, but we were substantially at parity then. We've been within a few percentage points, but at least since May, we've been 0.5% lower. And there's not much that we're going to be able to do to change people's notion of that, unless you want to be the person that sticks their neck out on social media and blasts back at the people who feel otherwise. But that's a very tricky thing, because you're going to wind up in the middle of, it's like having your name written on a bathroom wall.
Well, Ed, I mentioned that, Ed, on the Lake Worth Local. I said for 1,000 kilowatt hours, we're 0.5% less. But, Matt, you were talking about people on the websites, the community websites. Some of the people used to live here, but moved out and are on those websites. There's people that live in like Georgia or something that are on the Lake Worth Local because they used to live here.
Yeah, it's like Ed said, it's going to be very hard to actually change the public's perception. And we can win all the awards that we'd want to win for coming up with the best program ever. But people's opinions are hard to sway once they have them set in their heads. So I don't. Yeah, go ahead.
On awards, it's wonderful to get an award if it's a byproduct of something you were going to do anyway. To spend money to go chase an award is in my opinion, is a foolish venture. Because you're going to spend an awful lot of money to dot the I's and cross the T's in the award application and miss the forest of the trees, which was to achieve the good you were trying to achieve to begin with. Right. So you wind up wasting a lot of money in documentation and in pleading your case for the award. So I prefer to say, hey, if I got an award for something I was doing anyway, that's great. But to have spent all the money for the purpose of getting the award, you wind up overspending, and especially in management time to go get it.
Right. No, that makes sense.
Hey, Ed, I have a quick question. And there might be an answer to this, or you might not have it. But if we go about and do this, and we have the perfect program, we start, dropping usage rates, especially those at those peak hour usage rates. Is there a savings for the city that we've dropped, or not, maybe a savings either directly or indirectly, in that we don't have to invest in future infrastructure, or we can delay those future infrastructures? Or is, much what we have, either has been upgraded or needs to be upgraded? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And that's the third rail of this discussion. This is the part that people basically say, don't confuse me with the facts my mind is made up. And here's effectively what we have. You have to look at our costs falling into various buckets. One is the cost to generate power, both power, the energy that we get, and to have the capacity that we need. That's one cost. And you can put into there also the transmission cost to get it here, because you have to reserve that as well. Getting a space on the transmission line is something that you need to reserve in advance, and you pay for the space that you fill, but you can't get to fill it if you didn't reserve in advance. It's like saying, I'm going to fly to Atlanta tomorrow. Did you make a reservation? And you should no. Well, I may not have a seat for you, and if I do have one, it could be at 5 times what you would have paid last week or last month if you bought it early, right? So let's put generation capacity, generation energy, and transmission capacity into one bucket. Then there's the local infrastructure. The local infrastructure, which is the poles, the wires, the substations, the transformers, the trucks, the people, they all need to be there, whether you use a lot of energy or you use a little bit of energy. So for example, show me a neighborhood or a block where everybody's going to raise their hand and say, you know what, you don't need to upgrade my infrastructure because we all put in solar hot water heaters, or because we all put in solar, or because we all put in motion sensors in our indoor lighting, or we all switch to CFLs. No, they need the grid there, right? And they want a grid that's going to stand up when the wind blows too. In other words, they're not going to raise their hand and say, you know what, we only need small wires and we don't care if they fall down when it blows 40 miles an hour. So take the design for the fat wire and the 150-mile-an-hour pole to the next block. We don't need it. Nobody's going to raise their hand and say that. So they want that reliable distribution infrastructure. They want to know that the power is not going to go out in an inordinate amount of time. And they want to know that if it does go out, it's going to come back quickly. Right? So that's distribution infrastructure. So none of these conservation efforts are going to change what we need to do in rebuilding our distribution infrastructure. That's a hard one for people to grasp. Not going to change it at all. The poles that are out there that are 50 or more years old, the substations that are over 50 years old, they're suddenly not going to get young because a bunch of people put in fluorescent bulbs or replace their dishwashers or the refrigerators. It's not going to happen. The infrastructure needs to be rebuilt. What is going to, where you might see a decrease in cost, is back at the power generation source. Meaning that, well, now you need it since you had more efficient devices, less energy, therefore you incurred lower costs. That is true. The problem is, depending on the technology that you've chosen and what you've paid for it, what you've paid the customer in the form of an incentive to go and do this, does that incentive recover the cost that do you recover that? So the cost reductions that you enjoy, do they pay for the investment that you've made? So if I give you, and we used to use the $50 number as an example, and I don't know if that's the right number, but let's assume it's 50. If I give you $50 for a new dishwasher that meets some Energy Star rating number, and say, okay, it uses less energy. That means I had to, in theory, buy less energy, and in theory, have less capacity on reserve. But does the savings pay for it? Is it worth it?
How long was that payback period?
Yeah, we don't know that answer, right? I don't know that answer because it has to do with what I would refer to as diversity. I don't mean by diversity, you know, the economic or racial diversity of the people. I mean, how many of those dishwashers are actually going to get built, and how many would have been running at that point in time anyway?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at our history of peak loads, you'll see that our peak loads, in fact, have not been increasing. In recent years, they've been decreasing. And the city, you all, out of your bills, have taken on $23.5 million worth of debt to help do that. And you're paying for that already for the Siemens Energy Savings Performance Contract. So yes, if everybody had more efficient devices, in theory, you would need less electric generation capacity. However,
And transmission capacity and all of the other capacities on before it gets to us.
yes and no. Not always. So we, as the utility, we are obligated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the North American Electric Reliability Council, as administered by the Southeast Reliability Council and the Florida Reliability Council, to maintain certain levels of reserve capacity, which are functions of our peak. So yes, if you think that over time you've actually reduced the peak and that's actually showing up in data, yes. But what I suspect happens is you wind up paying a lot more money out in rebates than you're actually achieving in cost savings to pay that rebate off. That's going to be a very hard calculation for us to do because we don't know because if the device is going to be running at that time. So I'll give you an example. On transmission capacity, our transmission capacity on our share of what's referred to as the coincidental peak on the FPL system. And this is a universal, I say universal, this is a nationwide principle. So what does that all mean? What FPL does is they look at their peak load in any given day of the month. They look at their peak load for the month. And I can tell you that that typically falls on a weekday, and it typically falls between 4 and 7 p.m. Okay? When you get your transmission bill, it's based on your contribution to that peak. So whatever load you were at the time of the peak times the unit rate that you charge, that FPL charges. And these are all set through federal regulation and federally mandated rates. And they can't just raise the rate. We just went through a rate case with FPL on transmission. And we intervened in the rate case and we intervened successfully. And they got a lower rate than they would have if we had not intervened. And we also got a Tyler, $13 million, but that's another issue. So when they calculate your transmission bill, it's based on your contribution to the peak. In other words, how many megawatts you had on the system at peak, times the reservation rate or the transmission rate. But your peak is not based on what you actually peaked at. It's your peak plus your intermittent resources. So in our case, if it includes our solar, and if we had a power plant running at that time, you gross it up. So let's just pick nice, easy round numbers. Let's say our peak was 90, our contribution at the time of peak was 95 megawatts. Our historic peak, highest peak we've reached is 97.2, so let's use 95. If at the time that we were at 95, that was the PJM's, or rather not PJM, but FPL peak, and our contribution was 95, and our solar plant happened to be running, and at that point in time, it was running at a megawatt. They take the 95, they add a megawatt to that, and they charge us for 96. And yes, that's allowed by law, because the transmission system reservation and therefore the construction of that network transmission system is such that it would support our load, even if our intermittent resource was not available to us. Because a failure of the transmission system is not an option. So therefore, the transmission system must be built robust enough. So
Are you talking about 1 megawatt of solar from our in-city solar?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So our peak, our contribution to the peak is grossed up by our solar plant. Let's say, for example, we were running our combined cycle unit, which is 29 megawatts. Now, if we had they would also gross it up for that. All right. So they're basically charging you for transmission a rate that's tied to your connected load. They don't allow you to net out to a lower number. You can't say, oh, this month I was running a bunch of stuff, I was only doing 30. Yeah, no. Your connected load is 96, and that's what you're going to pay for.
But
if you
wait,
grow-
that 1 megawatt of solar that we generated in ours, is that coming through their grid?
No,
But
it's
we pay for it like we pay for the transmission like it is?
absolutely, and that's law, and that's been challenged on behalf of people in our situation at the federal level and lost. So it's not something that they're doing that's illegal, something that I just conjured up to make a point. No, that's fact. And
What's the rationale for that?
the transmission system on which we depend must be built to handle the ultimate need. And that 1 megawatt solar system, if the sun is not shining, you'd have to carry the full 96 megawatts. So it allows the owner of the transmission system, the transmission owner, what we call a TO, to build a transmission system that's robust enough to carry all the load, even if the sun is not shining that day, because that load is still there. The customer requirement is really 96. It's not 95. So that even though our meter with FPL said 95, that 1 megawatt that we're running, it represents the true customer load is 96. And you're going to pay for transmission based on the true customer load that you're serving. That's not contestable. So we best not spend our time. It may not seem. I'm not going to be Don Quixote and go, tilt at the windmill. That's already been tilted at many, many times before. And it's not like it's a local FPL decision where they say this is because we say so. No, this is the federal rules, and this is what it is. So let's go back to the 95 and say, okay, so now let's say I gave each of you $50 for this more energy efficient dishwasher. Well, if it's not running between 4 and 7 p.m. when I hit the peak, where's my savings? I didn't save, not on transmission. I didn't save at all. I just gave you money. And you feel better, but I didn't achieve anything. And I got to go back and say, okay, same thing with generation. We buy under our contracts generation to meet our peaks. So we pay for capacity based on where we get to on peak, not where we get to at 2 o'clock in the morning. We have to nominate how much capacity we want. Right? I say right, but most of you are not familiar with it, so that's what we do. So if we're going to hit a 95 megawatt peak, we have to come up with a way under our contract to make sure that we have 95 megawatts of power. Now the peak is going to come at a time of day when your dishwasher is not running either. Our peak and the coincidental peak tend to be very, very close. So we have our own peak, and then we have our contribution to the coincidental peak, which is when everybody else peaks, right? The moment of coincidence. Generally, they're pretty close. But the chances that you're actually running your dishwasher during that period of time are not 100%. Most people are probably running a dishwasher sometime after dinner. That may not be till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Well, since I gave you the rebate, you really haven't, and you're running it later in the evening, you really haven't helped me at all. I've just given you money. So you like me better, right? Now, you'll use less energy. Yes, so I have to buy less energy because now you use less energy. Okay. Well, I don't make money on the energy. I'm supposed to pass that through to you in a power charge, right? I wind up collecting less money from you through the meter, which means I have less gross margin or less money to pay for the debt service and the staff that runs the utility. and the transfer to the general fund, which is substantial. So it's hard for me to see how the example of the dishwasher actually saves or lowers the utilities operating costs. Now, we'll do more detailed studies to show that, but the math doesn't work. But you all like me better because I gave you each $50. The other issue is the $50 that I gave you, I don't have. So in order to get the $50, I got to raise everybody's bill a little bit. So collectively, I can get the $50 to hand out 150 to this group. I'm not picking on you folks. I'm just saying it as an example. So let's say, for example, we had 1,000 customers that put in dishwashers. Well, that's $50,000. I got to come up with $50,000 to hand out to people. Whether the thing actually saved me any money or not. I don't have the $50,000 in savings up front. So I need at least the working capital. That means I need to raise $50,000 from somewhere. Well, I have to do it through the surcharge. And that's in fact how the surcharge was created in the past, how it had to have been created because there was no other way to pay for these things. I tell people we're not like the federal government. It's not like I can tell Sue, hey, listen, when nobody's watching, you go over there and take some dollar bills and just make copies of them, right? We don't print money. We get money by collecting it from customers. So the concept that it saves us money in our situation is not necessarily a good concept now, or a good understanding of the business. Let's say, for example, you install enough things that you might be able to build a little bit smaller power plant. Well, we're not building a power plant anyway. The only way that it saves us some money is if the technologies or the things that we rebate people for are things that are likely to be running during our peak period. Therefore, I'm somewhat skeptical of dishwasher.
So you're referring to more like air conditioners.
I think so, but that doesn't mean that you guys should be infected by my thinking. I think your charge is to bring forward all the ideas,
right?
And then we can weigh them. So,
right.
So for example, the dishwasher might in fact save water. So it might be helpful for the water side to have a system that uses less water. It may help them maintain pressure, but I don't have a problem on the electric side with delivering you volumes of electricity. The problem that I have on the electric side is delivering you volumes of electricity reliably. And whether you have a high efficiency home or a low efficiency home, that doesn't change the fact that the pole is going to fall over when the wind blows, or the lizard climbs on it, or the transformer is 50 years old and it's going to fail catastrophically. It doesn't change that. So we need to build, you all need to build, this community needs to build a robust distribution system, regardless of how much energy conservation you do. And I'll give you an example. Right now, we're doing a project in the western portion of our territory where we have circuits that during certain contingencies, we can tie those circuits together. So think about two circuits that are proximate to each other, and I can tie the ends together, and I can feed one circuit from the other one if I need to, which we do on occasion. So hey, there's two circuits, two breakers, but they're somehow connected in the field, and I can say, hey, if circuit number one breaker fails, I can quickly feed everybody on that circuit from breaker number two on circuit number two. I can daisy chain those along. Oh, but in between those two circuits, there's sections of wire that are so small that they limit my ability to pick up all those other customers without literally burning down the wire. Because as the amperage goes up, the heat goes up dramatically on a small wire, right? So you'd say, well, if a whole bunch of those customers somehow stopped using electricity, I could leave those old small wires out there. Well, that's a lot of doorbells to ring to go ask them and say, listen, hey, would you mind if we just, leave the old stuff up there, but instead just give you a dishwasher that's more efficient or an air conditioner? It's not going to work, right? you need to be able to interconnect those circuits so you can readily flow the power back and forth and have high reliability. They may use less power, but the problem that we have in Lake Worth Beach is the fundamental reliability of the system. It is so aged, they can't do it reliably. So for example, Matt, I'll lean on your former life on the gas side. Could you imagine a situation where you can say to the homeowner, listen, I know the service line to your house is, 60-year-old cast iron at utilization pressure, but listen, why don't you put a solar hot water heater on your roof and we'll just leave that cast iron in the ground and don't worry about it.
That's not a great solution for the customer.
Exactly. Hey, the gas line could go any day, but don't worry, you'll have solar hot water. Okay. No, they're gonna want an elevated pressure plastic line, right, with a safety device, a curb stop, the whole bit, right? So that's where we're at. So these things don't always save us money, but it's the opinion of the commission, not the commission as a whole. I think I'm not counting votes on this, but I think what we owe them in good faith is conservation projects that are, or conservation programs that they see in the industry, and then they can decide whether they want them or not, because economics alone is not the sole determinant of whether they want to do these. This is where I want to make sure that I don't get on the thin ice as the utility person, saying I somehow screened out opportunities that they would have pursued because I didn't think they were economic, therefore I ruled them out. So the economic test should not be the sole test.
Right. Yeah, we're aware of that, because I think at this point in time, we're not going to even consider how we're paying for things. We're just going to come up with those ideas and then kind of go from there. Well, you brought up some good points.
So what I would suggest is if you want to use the former program as a guide and then refresh it maybe by looking at the FPL, I'm suggesting FPL and OUC websites. But because we're going to have we're situationally similar. OUC is our power provider, so that kind of puts us on a common cost structure. They're our supplemental provider, and FPL is geographically abuts us, and their rates are very similar to our rates at least at the residential level. And when they bid to be our power supplier, they were number 2 in the bid. They were close to OUC, but higher in cost, so they were not able to beat it. So I think it's a reasonably good proxy, and we're not going to have the time or the budget to hire teams of economists to put testimony together as to whether a refrigerator should be $50 or $60 or whatever it happens to be in their studies. The numbers that they put together have been vetted by the Public Service Commission and challenged by interveners and arrived at through a settlement process. So they're probably reasonable for us to use. That would be my advice.
And also, I know that because I have children and we do a couple of things in the community, even our partner in the trash sector, the refuse sector, Solid Waste Authority, they also have, in terms of education, they do have some educational components that they were handing out to kids at different events and whatnot. So maybe we can leverage some educational items that already exist and not reinvent the wheel that way either. And we figure out ways to hand those out and get them to the right people. But I know, I think FPL, they have also some educational programs. So I'll have to double check. And this could be, this could be comprehensive, and there could be a lot of education. We had a neighbor who came to our meeting recently for our neighborhood association, and they were saying, this is water example, but they would be talking to this person and the sink would be running and they'd be running around the kitchen doing 10 different things, and the sink's running the entire time. And that was either just a habitual thing that they do, but if they had an educational component to it, like to remind them not to use the sink so much, like while they're doing other tasks, kind of like when you're telling the kid to not run the faucet while you're brushing your teeth. We do have many different cultures here that might not have had exposure to that information, and just a matter of getting it to the kids who can then, you know, train their parents, you know, to do things that way. So I'm not sure what everyone else's thoughts are on the board, if they've been exposed to different educational programs in this area that you've seen, or maybe where you came from if you're not from around here. Most of this stuff is common sense, but maybe the problem is we don't have it in all of the languages that we need to have it in, you know, things like that.
My own personal observation has been, having raised children myself, and so Mr. McVoy and I are alike in some ways, more ways than people would ever believe, but wasting energy bothers us both. We try to achieve the reductions in entirely different ways, but it bothers us both, right? But I found that the most effective method of energy conservation, at least in my family, occurred when my kids had to pay for the gas in their car themselves. Okay, so you know, arguing with over, hey, turn out the lights, you're not in the room, turn off the TV, close the refrigerator door. You know, we raised them up north, you know, or even down here, doesn't matter. You open the doors, you got to run the air conditioning up there, you got to run the heat. You know, I jokingly say, do you think I work for the electric company or the gas company? Yeah, I did, but you know, but it's very hard. And frankly, I think that the schools are particularly poor in terms of educating students on the importance of energy conservation. I don't think they do anything with it, or even the importance of recycling.
Right. I think only if they do something like field trips to Solid Waste Authority. I don't even know if they do that, but I know that Solid Waste Authority does allow for trips. They used to before COVID, and they'd even have like a recycling day or like a festival of sorts. You can go there and you can go up the elevator into the control room and things like that. And it was pretty cool. But I did that on my own. The school didn't really do that. So that was kind of like something I was off to the side, just trying to look for, you know, for education for my own children. But I don't know. I guess there is a PTO group, and there are, you know, different groups for the schools. There's a education task force and things like that. I'm not sure if that would cross over into what their goals are. I think it's more about, you know, finding more money for the schools. But yeah, getting in educational materials with the schools would be probably one part of this program. I'm not sure if the at this point in time of giving tours of the facilities is you know, something that we can consider like basically field trips and whatnot, just to the, you know, the utility department, and go look at our 1960s turbines. Ooh, wow.
Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, I am in touch with a school group that has they were proactive. They approached me for a tour, and we're playing phone tag, but it's our intention to set up a tour for a school group. But I think that it boils right down. I think it has to be further than that, not just the occasional field trip. It's in the classroom as a part of their curriculum. Are they learning in their science classes the importance of energy conservation? And my guess is that they're hearing anything about it, it's about putting solar on our roofs, right? And you look and say, well, great, you're talking to kids about putting the importance of solar, but these are systems that could be in between $10,000 to $30,000 on the roof of their house. What about talking to them about the importance of just resetting the thermostat a few degrees, or closing the door, or having ceiling fans, or closing the windows, right? That might actually yield more benefit than saying, gee, if you had $20,000 or $30,000 to spend on your house, you could put solar panels on and be green. Well, who's gonna, you know, how many kids are, you know, especially in Lake Worth, are in a household that's going to be able to do that?
So
Not many. But how useful would it be for kids to go home and say, hey, mom, why don't we, or dad, why don't we, can we just take that thermostat up to 77 for a few days and see what it does to our electric bill for the month instead of having it 75?
Yeah, I mean, kids love apps and games, and if there was a way to make an actual game where you had to solve puzzles by being the most energy conscious, I'm just throwing something out there. I mean, that requires substantial resources to actually implement something like that. But
I agree. So that could be, there could be components of this which could be purely education related. In other words, some kind of an outreach program to the schools to talk to them about incorporating energy efficiency into their science curriculums. And then we could talk about, well, what grades should that be? Should that be, 5 through 8 or 9 through 12? Where should it be? And we could talk with it, that's the basics. I suspect it's not even discussed in the schools. But we should also talk about the kind of the structure of what we would like to do. And I'm thinking in terms of a table that could be created for the various, I'm just thinking out loud, I would suggest to you maybe some buckets that you want to create. So that I think the easiest bucket to create is a bucket of, let's call it kind of low-hanging fruit, easy to do within one department, and that's just rebates. And you've got some examples already in our previous program, and you look at the FPL program, look at the OUC program, see what kind of things they offer rebates for, and then just put those on the list. You may want to add, if any of them, for example, have a smart thermostat option. That was not in our previous program, but today having a programmable thermostat is pretty straightforward. I think it's pretty hard to buy one that's not programmable. But
now you said the word smart thermostat. That's different from programmable. Programmable just means you can set different times of day and whatnot. But smart thermostat, is that something that would actually talk to your meter and relay information? And that's getting way beyond the scope of this conversation.
Yes,
keep going.
I agree. And the concept of a smart thermostat is going to be fraught with issues, particularly around demand response. So let's kind of, I would suggest we come back and talk about that later, because I could talk for an hour on the benefits and the pitfalls of that alone.
Okay.
And programs that were launched and then abandoned right here in Florida, and what happened in Texas with the smart thermostat.
Okay, so let's just refer to it as a programmable thermostat for now.
Yep, exactly. I think programmable, and they've been around for years and years and years. I think it's pretty hard to buy one that's not programmable, but I think you probably could. But next time I walk to Home Depot or Lowe's, I'll take a look. But you may say, and I'm, maybe hint, you guys own the list. Do you want to put programmable thermostat on there as one of the items that you would provide a rebate for?
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, they have different costs. I know I had to buy one recently and it had Wi-Fi, and it was a little bit more expensive than just a simple one. But I had to buy mine based on the shape of the hole of the wall, not so much what the actual thing offered. But I think the one I was looking at was like $80 or something. And
yeah,
they get pricier because the new ones that have the Nest capability or Alexa controlled, like where you just start yelling at your air conditioner.
Yep.
They get a little bit more expensive.
Yep. I happen to have a Nest at my home. It has somehow lost communication with my router. I probably need to reset it. But I after some period of time with it, I realized how often is it I really need the house to be cooled off before I get there. I have it programmed for setbacks, but it also senses that I'm not, that we're not at home. And if we're not at home, it doesn't follow the setback schedule anyway. It just stays up high. It doesn't try to cool the house. So I'm not sure how much I really need to talk to it in a smart way. The fact that it's programmable and recognizes occupancy is fine for me. But I think, there may be other things. It has been suggested, for example, that we should incent people to get rid of their electric hot water heaters and instead put a solar hot water heater on their roof. I know that Commissioner McBoy has thrown that idea out there. Now, I'm personally not a fan of that. I can't see why all utility ratepayers should give somebody money to get rid of electric hot water. It's like I'm giving you money to stop buying something from me. But it doesn't, that's not a good reason to leave it off the list. So if you as a group think that it's worthwhile having on there, by all means, we should put it on there and test it in the public arena. Should we do that? So that, I think the kind of the first bucket is kind of stuff that's kind of low hanging, readily doable, you know, with the blunt instrument of, hey, I wrote you a check, right? Or I gave you a credit. The second bucket might be the things that require perhaps changes in codes. Or discussions or some kind of changing with historic preservation. To look and see, are there things that bump up against each other illogically in what you're trying to do for energy conservation and what historic preservation would allow you to do? Are there things in our building code? So for example, if you're trying to build something new today, you're building to modern day codes. So I believe that the modern day codes are sufficient to drive significant improvements in energy efficiency per square foot versus what was there before. You're going to have impact glass, you know, even a new air conditioner, central air unit in a 1,200 square foot unit is going to be much more efficient than the window shaker in the 70-year-old cottage, right? And if you look at what's happening, and you guys don't have the data, but I look at it from time to time. You're all familiar with the mid, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you can imagine, I've actually taken tours through there, and I haven't done this recently, but looked at some of the electric bills and say, wow, they're using probably 20 or 30% less energy than a comparable size standalone cottage. It's dramatically low, right? They're concrete boxes, impact glass, modern appliances in the kitchen, modern appliances in the laundry room. They've got a programmable thermostat, right? They've got a modern, they're probably running at least a 15 SEER air conditioner, central air in the unit. So they're very efficient, very efficient.
Part of the reason they're efficient, they're the big building with, you know, lots of units next to each other, a large volume as opposed to one standalone thing like a cottage.
Correct.
I mean, just being a big.
Yeah, their surface area, the heat transfer surface area is substantially less, right, per unit.
But we specifically protect those cottages as a community
Yeah,
to remain like cottages.
Oh yeah, yes. I'm not, and I think they
No,
should.
I'm just making a statement that there are, you know, do we as a community, do we want to be a community of the future, or do we want to maintain the past? And that's kind of just the thoughts I want to get out there. And when we talk about these things, we need to put those things into perspective, is that there are some things we can do, but you know, the woodlath old cottage is never going to have the building envelope that a modern building would. Even a concrete building from the 60s is going to be significantly improved from that. So
yeah, but even you know, notwithstanding, I watch This Old House a lot, right? And I look and say, hey, if you bought and I don't know if it makes sense economically to do this, but if you bought a cottage and you gutted it, as an extreme, right? Not many people can afford to do that, obviously, but if you put in a central air unit, or you put in a ductless, you know, mini splits, and you insulated the walls, insulated the attic, and you put in windows that somehow meet the requirements of the historic preservation, you've probably dramatically improved the energy efficiency of that cottage, and you still have the charm of the cottage, which is important to the community, right?
Yeah.
And you may say, hey, I want to incent people to do that because I don't want the cottage to fall in disrepair till it falls over. You know, for example, my older son lives in Charleston, and they have these, they call them, they're cottages that go back to pre-Civil War, sharecropper cottages, or cottages that were originally inhabited by people, you know, that were freed slaves, and they're protected architecturally. But unless the cottage falls down, you're not allowed to tear it down. So you have to rebuild it. So, and what it leads to is that people do wind up, in order to get that real estate, because they want to live in that particular area, will buy these cottages. They're called Freeman's cottages. And they're very long and they're very skinny. It's classic Charleston look. But they do beautiful, stunning renovations of them and make them very efficient. So that can be done. So part of the question is, what levels of incentives can we give to the utility, for example, for insulation and adding central air? I think somebody suggested already to replace the window shaker with the window unit. Those are things that could help keep the cottages and the windows.
Yeah, I had a question about these upgrades too, is that I'm not sure how FPL does it. I know we have our own internal auditors and FPL probably does as well, but when it comes to actually installing the installation or installing whatever device that they want to install, do they have a specific list of approved contractors that they work with, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. This seems to vary by utility. They all use the word approved contractors, but from what I've just in conversations and thinking this through, I don't think we want to get into the business of approving specific contractors or disapproving other contractors. I think what we would say is a licensed contractor. So the contractor has a license, whatever that license happens to be for that particular work, let's say an electrical license. That's probably sufficient for us. I don't think we need to try to figure out, and I don't know if you suggested this, to say, well, even though you're licensed, we like you or we don't like you. I think if you're a licensed electrician, you're a licensed electrician. If you're a licensed contractor, you're a licensed contractor. So that avoids any potential, that avoids an awful lot of work on our part, but it also avoids any potential litigation with the contractor saying, why did you disapprove me? How come you won't approve me in your program? I'm a licensed, mechanical contractor. I'm a licensed window installer. I'm a licensed roofer, and I did installation. Why are you refusing me? So my view is let the contractors pick. Well, I'm sorry, let the public pick when they're doing their project at their home. Let the homeowner pick whoever they want to have do the project. We just want to say that we're not going to issue. I suggest you say we're not going to issue rebates unless you're using a licensed contractor. Because a licensed contractor is probably one that's going to go ahead and pull the right permits and do the work in some workmanlike fashion. I also don't think that we want to get into.
Buddy Frank will do it for $50, no questions asked.
Yeah, a licensed contractor has probably got books. They're probably paying taxes. They're probably paying their people on the books.
Fully insured.
Exactly, fully insured, minimum wage. Following labor laws, safety laws, whatever, as opposed to, hey, my buddy and the 3 other firemen for the house are coming and they're gonna reinsulate my house this week, and I'm gonna give them all, some of the money that we gave them. No, it's got to be a licensed contractor. And then I think there has to be an inspection component. I think you'd have to say, hey, did you go to the premises? Did you see the new installation? Did you get the receipts? And were the receipts from a licensed contractor? It's just that there has to be this, verification process.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to find the old website that's referenced in this thing we shared earlier. See what the actual details were for the proof.
We have some of that. There's some old PowerPoint presentations that we need to go through, and Joel has offered to come in, part-time and see what records can be found.
Okay.
Some of that stuff may be beyond the retention period. Well, what I'm looking for is types of information as well. How many dollars were applied for in grants, even though the grant information are checks that we wrote out of the city. So there might be information. It may not get to the details of specific homeowners that got the money. I'm not sure. That's public record, by the way, who got the money and how much and when. But the total volume of dollars that were distributed. So what did the cash inflows and cash outflows look like?
Yeah, I'm curious to know how much staff actually had to pull from that fund versus how much went out in terms of rebate and grants and whatnot.
Yeah, so a very rough number is the metered megawatt hours is in the range of about 430 to 450,000 megawatt hours per year. So let's just say it's 430,000, and you say, hey, it was about $2 a megawatt hour. In theory, then it would have been, $700,000 to $800,000 a year of revenue coming into the program at about $2 a megawatt hour. So it really would have been, $1.95 a megawatt hour, but let's call it $2 just. So there would have been, let's say, somewhere in excess of $700,000 a year of revenue. That's my rough calculation. And then you had a staff of 5 or 6 people that were paid substantially less than what we pay staff today, because it was 2009 to 2012. Fully loaded with benefits, because you got to pay their benefits too, right? Taxes, all that kind of stuff. So how much was actually left over for grants? My suspicion is that if as recent as 2020, I was still paying a couple of people out of the fund, it must have built up more money than it actually dispensed. But I don't have the specifics of that. All the things I focused on, that was pretty far down the list of things to go figure out in my first 4 years. More worried about whether I can keep the lights on tomorrow.
Okay.
But Joel may be able to help us find that history, as our financial person, Clyde, who can go look and see what kind of dollar movements existed in those funds back at that time. So, for example, it would have been in the annual comprehensive annual financial reports. The audited, that's what we refer to sometimes, the audited financials. You'd be able to see what kind of movements occurred.
Right. So would you be able to bring some of that information to the next
yes.
meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, you should have that. So that's task staff to go put that stuff together.
So what do we have to do by the next meeting, and how should we break this up? I'm trying to figure out what I should do by the next meeting.
Well,
Yeah,
first we have to figure out how many more meetings we're going to have by the deadline, correct?
Yeah, so I would suggest certainly no less than once a month, and maybe have to go to twice a month to do this. You probably want to limit the meetings to no more than, if you want to say 2.5 hours or 3 hours, you can pick that time. I know for me, I got a full-time job already, but and all of you do as well. But I think the commission wants to know that progress is being made, and at some point, I would say that Ryan, as the chair, or whoever you so designate, would come to the commission meeting and give them an update on the progress that you're making. Because I probably would not wait.
No, I'm not opposed to giving an update.
Yeah.
But I think we all need to reach out to our commissioners, mayor, and seek their individual input as to if there's any key items that they definitely want to see not left out, or things that they're not really too concerned about in terms of their wishes, because we're allowed to talk to the commissioners on a one-on-one basis and pick their brains a little bit, and then come back, like you said, with kind of the basis for building this little map with the different buckets of where we want to pursue things, and then it'll start taking shape as an actual presentation. And I don't know if we need a month to do that, or if we need a couple of weeks. I don't know what staff's availability is the end of this month, as we're going into Thanksgiving holiday travel time.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna make Joel available to you, and he's part-time, so we'd have to just see what evenings he's available. But I'll impose on his time, and he seems to be willing to do that. My time is somewhat limited because I'm going to be involved. I'm not walking away from this by any stretch of imagination, but I need staff to actually crank things out. So let me suggest right now the format of a table, which I see having, let's say, at least 3 columns. and I'll suggest the 3 columns. And you can each kind of scribble this on a piece of paper, just draw 3 or 4 vertical lines. So in the first column, I would suggest the specific thing that you want to incent. It might be, let's say, dishwasher, or programmable thermostat, or air conditioner, or whatever that particular thing is, right? Or refrigerator, washing machine, or put it all under Energy Star appliances, whatever. That would be in column 1. The second column could be what you see on the FPL or OUC or our prior records, once I get them to you, what we paid people for those particular things. How much money was involved per device for that specific device. The third column might be the conditions under which it was given. It had to meet a certain efficiency rating or something like that. The fourth column would be who would be eligible. And the eligibility thing is varied. In the city's program, the old program, as I understood it, it was residential only with an income limit. I don't know that that's the case in the FPL program or the OUC program, nor should you be guided by it. You can put down what you find, but that doesn't mean you're locked into that. So if you feel that everybody should be able to get a rebate on a refrigerator, whether you're residential or commercial, whether you make $100,000 a year, whether you make $1 million a year, or whether you're on Social Security making $35,000 a year, that you may decide, hey, we don't care. The appliance is the appliance. That's up to you to recommend. So I'm thinking of these probably up to 4 columns now.
I think that's still 3.
Is it still 3?
I think so.
I got 4.
Oh,
got 4?
what was the fourth one that you?
Things you want incentives for, what was paid for when you look at FP&L and OUC and all that. And then 3 is conditions under which it was given, and 4 is who is eligible.
Oh, eligibility was its own column. I see.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then I think down the road, if we assimilate what you each come back with into a master and give you more background on it, you will then be in a position to start force ranking them from highest to lowest. And it'd be a little bit too early to do this, but there's going to be, let's say we add a 5th column down the road, which says ability, effort required to implement, high, medium, or low, or something like that, right? So the lowest cost things to implement might be just an outright rebate on the purchase of a device. You show us the receipt, we give you the rebate. That's low implementation effort, right? At the other end of the spectrum, it could be, hey, we're doing a grant program and we're gonna give you grants to re-insulate your home. Well, now we've actually got to go to the home. We've got to see, get up into the attic, confirm that yes, there's insulation there that appears to be new, or are we going to check it before you do it? And we check it after. We're going to measure the depth of the insulation, or we want to see the R value on the wrapper. That's probably more complex to implement, right?
Yep. And also raccoon removal.
Yeah, exactly. Or windows. We're going to go check to see that, were the windows really done 2 years ago, or were they just done within the window of this, no pun intended, within the time frame of this program. Now, the ones that could be very difficult to implement might be in the extra difficult category, would be something that requires some kind of a change to historic preservation or building codes. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be on the list, but you may want to put those in anyway. And water should be on there too, because they're going to ask for water. So if you think of water ideas, throw them on there.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to mention that even though we aren't specifically tasked with water conservation, if we do have to put that on there to leave no stone unturned when it comes to conservation ideas.
Yeah, I think the low flow shower head is probably the most obvious thing to do, right? I'm thinking of the Seinfeld episode though, where they bought the bootleg shower heads.
Yeah, I mean, they even have the low gallon toilets where
Yes.
they have the two buttons, you know.
Yeah.
There's different gallons per minute aerators for every single bathroom and kitchen sink.
Hey, for the crazy idea for commercial, would you incent a waterless urinal?
I see.
They're not unusual.
Yeah.
That might be of value to somebody who's renovating a restaurant bathroom or bar.
Yeah, I don't know, because in this the website I found, it's only mentioning the electrical energy side, but I do know that there were water components.
Yep.
I just don't have proof of what was done there. So I'm gonna do some more of my own digging, and I encourage everyone to do some digging as well, so be more prepared for the next meeting. The question is, do we want to meet in 2 weeks, and would that be enough time, or do you think we should kick off the next meeting in December 1st?
I would suggest 2 weeks, because right now we're going to throw a lot of stuff at the wall.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that as well.
Yeah. And
Okay, so 2 weeks is the 17th.
you can promote it as a workshop, because you're the chair, so you can decide if you.
Yeah, I think these can all be driven as workshops until we get our thing fleshed out, and then during one of our final meetings, we'll actually take a vote to finalize it. But I mean, if we have to start voting on individual items along the way, I mean, that's something we could do. But I figure as a group, I mean, I wish we had a full complement of board members, so we can have more heads and more thoughts here. But yeah, I'm comfortable just using it as a workshop for now, and we can formalize it if the need arises, if we start getting into some deadlock conversations and whatnot.
I think you can do, for example, if you want to establish priorities, high to medium to low, you could probably do that by consensus. And then if you want to have a vote on the final submittal in February or something like that, or March, whatever it turns out to be, then you could vote on the final one. You can do that.
Yeah, we're a ways from that point. So I think in these next few meetings, it's going to be just more getting this idea centralized and making sure we have all the right info. And like you said, start ranking these things.
Yep. Now, how much time do we want to go for another 10 minutes? I can touch on the concept. Do you want to talk about demand response? Do you want to wait?
The one person who would like to have this conversation in depth with you is not here. I know about demand response, but I think if there's the opportunity for others to learn about it, and also for the public to learn about demand response, if it's only going to take another 10 minutes, I don't have an objection.
Yeah, I can make it quick. So, and I'm sure Ramsey will talk about more, something I know he's passionate about. So demand response is a useful tool if you need demand response. What demand response means, or it's a technology that allows the utility to send signals to devices in the field, namely customers' homes, if you choose it to be, or commercial business locations, to turn off specific devices on demand. So what it does is, for example, if the utility has a situation where it says, hey, I need to somehow limit the amount of energy flowing into that area, I have a way to do that without turning off everybody's power. I can selectively shut devices off in the home, whether it's a hot water heater or an air conditioner or some other device. Typically, it's a hot water heater an air conditioner, and there might be a third device that's escaping me at the moment. But I send it a signal to go and shut off. Now, in order to achieve that, I need to install equipment to do that. And what it does is it allows you to immediately turn off that device remotely and eliminate that load. The problem is, well, we're in the business of selling electricity, and we're in the business of improving our reliability. So while we're spending millions of your dollars, we're borrowing it, right? And spending millions to improve reliability. It's a hard pitch for me to say, now I'm going to borrow more money so I can turn you off. So the things that I'm turning off are things that you want in your life. You want your air conditioner on. Oh, the other one's the pool pump. You want your pool running, and you want your hot water heater. Now, if you say, okay, you can turn it off, I'm not using right now, I have to say, well, what have I really achieved? I'm turning off something you weren't using right now anyway. So I really haven't reduced anything. But the perception is that, well, that somehow that helps. So this is caught on in the energy industry across the whole country as a conservation tool. I offer that it's really not. It's paying you for the right to turn you off and not sell you something that I'm in the business of selling. And now I have to deploy the technology to go and do that, to solve a problem I don't have. So we need to rebuild our distribution system. In other words, if we were going to keep the same old distribution system we've had for 40, 50, 60 or more years, I'd say, oh, you're probably going to need demand response. So for example, on our 4 kV system, up until recently, it would not be unusual for us to have to run between 300 to 400 amps per phase of load. Well, the limit is really 200. So now you're taking bare open wire copper at 4,000 volts and you're pushing it well over 300, 350, 360, 390, close to 400 amps. And you're literally sagging the copper. You're heating the heck out of it. And all the connections are now weak. Yeah, eventually you basically got a welding rod and you're burning down stuff. So you could say, well, if I had the ability to decrease the demand by turning things off remotely, that would help solve the problem. Yes. But the bottom line is you still have an antiquated distribution system that needs to be rebuilt to withstand storms, because those poles, the cross arms are literally rotting and collapsing. The poles are folding over, right? The insulators are cracking and falling down. It's literally, stuff is falling down. So what we've been doing is converting people from the old 4 kV system. We've been converting over to brand new 26 kV infrastructure. With the brand new 26 kV infrastructure, we get the ability to deliver to the homes all the power they need, so I don't need to interrupt it. I've hardened it because I only build things that are designed to withstand Category 5 storms. And I'm retiring the old infrastructure and moving it. And with the new infrastructure, I can also serve all the things they're going to want to do in the future, like charge their cars, right? Adding car charging to a home can be almost as much as 25 to 50% increase in the electric use of the home. You're adding anywhere between, let's say, 30 to 85 kW of storage that you're going to recharge every day or two. In a home that might only use 800 to 1200 kWh in a month. So you have to significantly improve the infrastructure. So you can't just say, well, I'll do demand response and leave the old infrastructure in place. It really doesn't work. Where demand response could also help you is to say, well, instead of on peak buying more peak power, I interrupt people. But think about the message that's sending to people. I'm going to pay you to interrupt you. And in order to pay you to interrupt you, I'm going to charge everybody else more. So I can pay you to interrupt you. Now, that does in fact happen in the investor-owned utility world. And the regulators who are reacting to the intervening community who wants these things, because in theory it's good for the environment, is saying to the utilities, go ahead and install this stuff and put it in your rates and charge the customers for it. They'll say to the utility, let's say to FPL, it could be a number, it's in the millions. It could be upwards of 100 or so, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars. We're going to allow you to get 9.5 to 10.5% return on the dollars that you invest in a conservation program. You're going to raise your rates to recover it by the amount necessary to get that 9.5 to 10% return. And so they say, okay, I'll go do it, because you're going to pay me to do it, because you're going to allow me to raise my rates to recover that expense. Left to their own devices, they would not do it, because the energy that it saves them, the dollars that it saves them, isn't enough to justify the expense. That's the general framework. However, nonetheless, there are still demand response programs, and the utilities do use them. The frustration for the utilities that I've seen, for example, there's a municipal utility in Florida that in fact rolled that out, and they were in fact using it to reduce their demand on peak. They were using it so much so that the public complained, basically saying, I never thought you'd actually use it. So I appreciate the money you gave me per month to have this in my home, but I didn't think you were really going to turn back my air conditioner and turn off my hot water heater. And the answer is, well, what did you think we were going to do with it, right? So in that particular utility, they shut down the program after having invested all the money to put it out there. So what you wind up with is then opposition from the customers after they've been getting the payments to say, no, you are obligated. We are going to shut you off. We are going to shut off those devices, because if I can't shut them off, I can't realize the economic benefit of having given it to you and having given you the money. So for example, FPL has a program, they pay you $5 per month per device. I think it's the hot water heater, the air conditioner, and I think the pool pump. So you can get as much as $15 per month. I'm not sure, but you can find it on our website. And then they send an electrician, not an FPL electrician, they send a contractor to your home to install the equipment to do this. So they have to buy the equipment to do it. They have to pay the contractor to install it, and they pay you $5 per month per device. Well, I would venture to say that just sending the contractor to your home and installing the equipment has got to be every bit of $300 to $500. Well, let's say it's $300. $300 is 50% of the gross margin that we make per year on a residential account, the entire account. So a residential account that might be using $1,000 to $1,200 for 1,000 to 1,200 kW per year, per month, or 800 to 1,200 in that range. Over the course of the year, we might make $600 of gross margin on it. And now we're going to give half of that back just to install the device to shut off the power on 3 devices, and an additional $5 per device per month in a payment. Numbers just don't work, in my view. Now we can do the more detailed study, but I find it hard to understand how the dollars work. But in the investor-owned community, the Public Service Commission says, we'll let you recover it in your rates. Take it a step further. You say, okay, I shut the hot water heater off. Did you use hot water at all while I turned it off? And if you did, I'm just going to heat the same water back up a little bit later, right? So it just defers the time. And if you reset the house air conditioner from, let's say the air conditioner was running, the house was at 76, and you turned it off for 15 minutes or for a half hour, whatever the time frame is, and the house drifts up to 80. Well, when that time period is up, the system's going to kick back on, and it's going to cool the house back down to where it was before anyway. So did you really save energy, or did you just defer the time period in which it was used? Now, if we reset your thermostat in the hour before you go to bed anyway, maybe you don't care. You're not going to try to cool the house back down. Unless you're in a house where your partner sets the air conditioner on stun so we can sleep.
What temperature is that?
It's at least one comforter. But we have a very efficient home in a brand new air conditioning system. So, but not every, we got the fans running. And my point is that some of these technologies, some of these, the demand response is it may decrease the immediate peak, but it just shifts the energy consumption to a later period of time. So you didn't really achieve energy savings. You just shifted the time frame in which it occurred.
Right. So in the end, is the customer actually saving any money or reducing their carbon footprint that way?
Questionable. Questionable.
Well, I'm not sure if anyone else has. I'm not sure if you were finished with that presentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
However, notwithstanding the science and my suspicion on the math, this is something that the community, that many people in the community feel strong about. So think of this almost as is a form of a societal benefit. It's something that they want. And the test is, okay, this is what it's going to cost. We think it'll cost to give it. And commission, do you want to approve it? But like I
Seems
said,
the only benefit of this demand response is you can reduce the use at a peak load. You could shift it from peak to non-peak, but overall use, it doesn't seem to reduce.
correct.
Whatever benefits there are for lowering peak use.
Right.
That seems to be the only thing.
Right. So what we would have to do is we'd have to say, okay, what is it costing us on peak for that capacity? It's really what you're going after is the peak period capacity. So if you extrapolate this in large numbers across a 5 million customer system like FPL, you might be able to say, hey, if we deploy 100 megawatts, or they actually may have upwards of 300 or 400 megawatts of on-demand peaking capacity, on-demand reductions. You can say, well, instead of building 400 megawatts of peakers, I've instead shut my customers off. And I invested hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. And the commission is allowing me to charge my customers to recover that investment at my allowable rate of return, which is 9.5 to 10.25, somewhere in there. So if I had built the 400 megawatt peaking plant, I would have earned a return on that investment. But instead, I built a virtual 400 megawatt peaking plant, and I got paid for it that way. And I have to, if I want to get those earnings, I have to talk these customers into doing this. So sales team incentive, push this like crazy today. Sell all of these things. Lake Worth Beach is not in that position. We have different economics. Our economic model is different. Yes, we do pay for peaking capacity, but to be able to impact that in such a small population is going to be very, very difficult. And the city's already done a lot to drive down its peak energy use.
Well, that's kind of why I wanted to take this time and get back into the community and have some conversations with people and ask them like what they would look for in a program, like what they would get out of it, I mean, that's pretty much what it's all about, is to make people feel good about their utility and to save money. And how can we achieve that without spending a ton of money?
Right. The fact is that there is only one person in this entire community who's ever mentioned demand response. And that's Ramsey.
Well, next time he's here, we shall hear from him and his thoughts.
Yeah. I can see how it benefits the contractors to install it.
Yeah, I like to have both sides of that conversation, so I know he'll have some arguments for it. But yeah, I think we're at a point now we can move on to wind down the meeting. I know David, Matt, if you have any more final thoughts on the homework assignments or whatnot for our next meeting on the 17th.
Okay, so I'm going to go research and build these columns of the what kind of incentives, who should be on it and stuff like that. I should just build my own list and bring it.
Yes.
All right, I'll work on that.
Okay. And if you want to reach out to your commissioners individually, the mayor, your neighbor, anyone, and just kind of have some interviews with them as well, that'd be great. Otherwise, if you want to go on Google or visit the FPL OEC websites and research their programs, that way we can come back to the next meeting more knowledgeable and have a basis.
Yeah, and I think in the next meeting or the next few meetings, it's somewhere in this process, you probably want to talk about the concept of having kind of an open forum workshop where the community can come. Although I think you always have to take those things with a grain of salt, because there's going to be some people, I venture to say there's a small segment of the population that is going to be passionate about this. But remember, there are, in our entire service territory, which includes people outside of the city, by the way, many outside the city. Let's say 40,000 people in total, right? 27,800 meters are out there right now, of which about 27,300 are active. But there's another 15,000 that are in water, right? And you count all the residents in the homes. There's a lot of people that have a say in this. You got to be careful not to just listen to the 12 that showed up at the meeting.
Yeah, I don't think a board like this ever had a public forum. I mean, I would assume that once we actually come up with something and we vote on it and it goes to the commission, and if they want to talk about it ad nauseum, I think after half an hour, it has to go to a workshop.
Yeah.
At that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the people can come out and if they have a loud public comment at that point, where they can just get to business and start, mulling over the board's, plans.
Now, I tend to focus on economics, but that doesn't mean that everything should have to pass some kind of an economic test.
Let's give everyone a free air conditioner.
There you go.
Figure it out.
Exactly.
Well,
doesn't make,
I did have an idea for a crazy concept, and I'm not sure if it's even legal, where, how we have that care to share column in our bills.
Yeah.
And it's not really used that much for whatever reason. But I know that during COVID and having all the problems with people having issues with paying their bills and whatnot, if there was a way, I'm not sure this is even conservation slanted, where you could put money in, like buying a lottery ticket that would go towards buying a chance to have a waived utility bill based on how many people enter this, I don't know, pile or fund, as you would say. And then that fund could grow, and whatever is not utilized for the winner goes towards, say, the conservation fund. So kind of like with the whole concept with the lottery for schools, where someone wins $1 million, but there's $20 million worth of tickets sold. That
Right.
19.
You have the same problem there, where that someone might be winning an incentive for their landlord rather than themselves. I don't, and to me that needs to be something we really think about. It's not an investment in your own property. It could be an investment into someone else's property, and we need to identify that as well.
Well, I was talking about just to go toward a utility bill, like you pitch in like $1, but you have
but
your $400.
But that, I understand, but that part doesn't reduce. It doesn't make any energy conservation.
No,
the part
the overage
that you have,
every month the fund would get replenished because we would grant out, from the leftovers who, this is just a wild idea that doesn't really have legs, but
Yeah.
you know what I'm trying to say, like, if your bill was $500, you win the $500, maybe there's a second place person. And then say there was 30,000 tickets sold to this concept, that's $30,000 that can go toward grants. And it's all voluntary.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought. I agree. We should identify something.
That's why I don't know if it's legal or not to even offer that kind of situational transaction. So, like I said, I'm not leaving any stone unturned. That was just a wild concept, and if people like respond to that, we'll see if it's legal or not. Maybe we throw that in there. But like having ways to pay for this stuff, like I don't want to have to just come up with all these cool conservation ideas and have no thoughts as to how they're going to get paid for, because we do have channels that we can get grants from or work with other agencies like the CRA or partners like SWA or somebody or other ways to get. I think we had a presentation by the Solar Energy Loan Fund, which is kind of like an alternative to PACE, where people can find sources of money to pay for these things. And most of the time, I think that'd be a homeowner, not so much a tenant utility customer. But yeah,
that's true. So I've actually mentioned to the commission and to Commissioner Boy that, hey, not everything that we do, and Ramsey has basically said the same thing. I don't know if he was echoing my comments or again the same way, but not everything that we do has to involve money collected from customers. So there are things that we could do, for example, under the either PACE or under the Solar Energy Loan Fund, the SELF program that was presented on a month ago, whatever it was. We could proactively look at customers who we suspect could benefit from that. Right, this new manager could focus on identifying who those customers are, and then being proactive and approaching the customer and say, hey, your energy use per square foot appears to be very, very high. Your bills appear to be high. We can tell that you're renting or you're a landlord or a homeowner. And are you aware of these programs where you could get, low interest loans or grants to do some improvements in your home? Or maybe you're in business. So we should be doing some of that. So not everything that we do should immediately, should have the knee jerk of immediately saying, that's going to cost us money. We need to surcharge everybody to do it. There's some things that we can do to help people that may not involve that.
Yeah, that's great.
I suspect that there's not a lot of things that we could do, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
Every little bit helps.
Yeah.
All right. So no other comments? No. Okay. David, did you want to, at this point, talk about the community solar, because it's now time for board comments as we're winding down? Did you want to touch on that, or do you want to save it for the next meeting?
Well, we can talk about it more next meeting. I'll just say that was another proposal from Commissioner McVoy. He wanted to have more solar built in the city, and people would buy into it. Like they would buy a share of the solar field, and that solar power would be like, instead of having a solar panel on your roof, you would buy into a share of that, and it would be like you would get that power. I don't know if it would come off their bill. I don't know if they would get charged. I don't know what the economics were, but it was like kind of an alternative for having a solar on your roof. It would be like
Right.
Everyone would have everyone have their solar field out in a field somewhere, and you would buy in to be part of it. I don't know the real details of it. That's what it was about. So I just wanted everyone to know about it. We could maybe talk about it at the next meeting.
Well, I'd only want to talk about it if it crossed over into conservation territory, because we're not really haven't been tasked with discussing that as a concept with an implementation model.
No, that was a separate proposal from the conservation proposal.
Do you think is there any way, shape, or form that community solar concept crosses over into a conservation territory, or is that just completely separate?
It's completely separate.
I think it's separate because this is the conservation is reducing use the community solar is having the source be solar in place of carbon fuels, carbon sources.
Well, because it goes back to the original point you made. Are we reducing people's carbon footprint with this program, or are we saving them money?
I don't know. It's a mix of both, but I'm not. It's reducing carbon footprints part of it, but they probably also want to reduce people's money, reduce people's bill. But that's that's another issue.
Yeah, because I don't know, and I don't have all the facts. I don't think that switching over to community solar would necessarily bring down their bill significantly, but it would make them feel a lot better about where the energy was coming from. But we do have, the commissioners are on top of that one, I believe.
There's also a significant problem with that. Most the people who are pushing this concept, what they're not telling you is, and what I've been trying to tell the community is that we've already bought so much solar that there are going to be hours during the day when we have more energy coming at us than we have a place to put it, than we have a customer for it. Think about that. We've bought so much solar in anticipation of growth that there are going to be days during the year and many hours during the day when we will have bought more stuff than we have a customer to put it to. Now we went long because we bet on some things happening. One was important to us as a community. The second was we bet that there would be growth in customers and growth in customer energy use, particularly from the standpoint of energy vehicle charging, but also the Bohemian, Deco Green, the Gulfstream Hotel, those types of things, car charging that was going to eat into that, and that our ownership or our role in the Stanton 1 project, which is a coal project, would come to an end. We bet on that unit retiring early in the 20-year period of the contracts that we entered into. And that, in fact, is coming to fruition. So the unit will be coming off of coal and the unit will be retired probably by 2027. So no longer than 3 years into the deal, into our solar PPAs, Stanton 1 will be retired. So the power that we would have made will instead come from the solar. So we've bought so much solar, to the point where my peers in the industry is saying, wow, you really bet big on this. The problem that we have is certain members of the community either don't know that or don't want to accept it, or saying, yeah, but go buy more. Where am I going to put it?
And keep it in my house.
Right. So if we have a no growth posture, right? No development posture, where are we going to put this solar that we bought? There is no storage technology that's economically viable today.
Will there be soon? I always hear about battery storage coming down in price.
We can't answer that until it happens. We're way too far down the line on that.
All right.
So just because something comes down in price doesn't mean you can afford it, right?
Yes.
There are certain cars that have come down in price. I still can't own them. Therefore, I'm not going to, my wife's not going to force me to buy one. I still can't afford it, right? Yeah, it's great that it came down in price. I still can't afford it. So yeah, batteries are coming down in price. In many places where you see batteries getting developed and pushed, for example, FPL is doing batteries, again, where the regulators have said, hey, this is in the best interest of the public. Go ahead and do that and pass the costs on to the customers. We'll let you get your allowable rate of return, even though it doesn't yield that in actual savings.
Yeah, I saw that they were bragging about the expansion of solar, but at the same time saying we have to charge you more to expand these solar fields.
Absolutely, because they're not, well, it depends on where natural gas prices are. The units that we got into are actually very, very competitive. But I'll put this in perspective. So we love our landfill project, right? We got solar in the landfill. Every unit of electricity that comes off that costs us 14.5 cents. That's just the fuel charge. That's just the PCA component, 14.5 cents. The stuff that I contracted for with FMPA, 1/4 of that. That's the economies of scale.
Yeah.
And the tax code helping.
Well, part of this educational component, going back to the conservation program and the educational part of it and the field trips. I remember when I first joined the board back in 2017, they were talking about a fence and a grandstand and whatnot for the solar field. I don't think it's a bad idea to revisit the idea of making some kind of ecotourism stop destination being that field, if it's at all possible, without exposing it too much to, I'm not sure what I want to try and say, but letting people visit it, learn something, like especially the children, but also, citizens and whatnot, because we haven't really been, sharing that field with a lot of people. And then while we're there, you can say, well, did you know that this is just one small part of our, our solar, that we get a lot of solar from this place and this place and this place. And then, as kids come and go, they'll educate their parents, hopefully, and more people will talk about all the good solar that we're buying from these other fields.
It'd probably be a lot cheaper to hand every one of them an iPad while the drone flies over than it's going to be to create the ADA compliant parking area, viewing area, access, restrooms, for somebody to sit there and stare at the panels. Okay, I saw them. I'll get back in the car.
Yeah. For something you can see driving down 95 too.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, they're on 165 roofs in town, including Ryan's. Why don't we just all come over to Ryan's house, right? So my point is that that's a very expensive thing to do. We could put some solar trees up in town, which would be a lot cheaper than creating viewing stands. And then I have the staff who's going to give the tours, by the way, right? And I've got nowhere to park. I don't have any way for somebody with this disability to actually get in there.
Yeah, I only bring that up because I'm also on the tourism task force, and one of the topics that came up were all the the Lake Worth Beach resources and cottages and cool things that are inside, and it being a very green friendly city, that was one of our resources. But like you said, if we did offer something in the future in terms of ecotourism, like a smaller scale thing that it's in the middle of, by the city hall or something, could be more than adequate. And then we give people the ability to go to a website or something, just some kind of educational component.
Yeah, what we're looking at doing here at the 1900 building where I am still here now is perhaps putting some solar panels in this parking lot and having car chargers is probably the easier place to do it, because we've got an area that's unshaded. We could do it without spending huge amounts of money because it wouldn't be a big system, but we could have car chargers underneath them as well. We've considered a thing like that at the beach complex. But that comes with its own host of problems, because liability of the power supply to the beach is going to require millions to repair it.
And that's a very corrosive environment as well too.
Oh, absolutely. But there's some people that just don't want to be confused by those facts. They say, and then in order to put solar of any scale out there, you got to cut down a lot of trees. We have to come up with some unique architecture for the deployment that doesn't take the trees down. There's tall palms, all those little islands that were put in with greenery and palms make it very difficult to deploy any kind of substantial solar. And then if you put solar in, you could never put a parking deck in. You have to tear it back out and put it back on top of a parking deck, but you can't get a parking deck approved either. So the beach just becomes a big problem. But yeah, the roof of the new city garage with vehicle charging there, and the parking lot here at the 1900 building with vehicle charging here would work. And some solar trees that we could put around town, for example, a cultural plaza or something like that. With phone chargers, so people could charge their cell phones right there outdoors.
Oh, the kids would love that.
Yeah. find a way to put solar trees at each of the elementary schools, for example.
Oh, now there you're thinking. How much do those cost to install at this point?
What's that?
How much do those cost to install?
I've
One tree I looked at that kind of expanded in the morning and then kind of closed itself like a flower. It was like
Right.
20 grand.
Yeah, I was thinking of the ones that it would be similar to what you see when you pull up to Palm Beach Airport, you're just pulling up to the terminals.
Oh, okay.
They're on the grassy areas you're pulling up. Things like that we could put outside the schools.
Yeah,
And
all
of
good
course,
ideas.
add car chargers at the schools because, why wouldn't teachers also need them?
True. Very true.
Not many middle school kids driving these days, but certain plated teachers are driving. And you got to believe that if you're in this for decades like we are, that you're going to see vehicle charging, electric vehicles more and more and more. The stations that we have already are seeing every nothing but growth. We slowed down a little bit in June and July and August, but I was looking at stuff recently. October picked back up again. So I mean, we're not hitting the ball out of the park, but people are availing themselves of the service. And the more car chargers we have installed in public, the more accessible electric vehicles become for people that don't have car charging available at home. And we're charging a very low rate, which is the 1,000 kilowatt hour residential rate. So I don't know that that fits into conservation. It's certainly a greenhouse gas reduction thing, but I'm very bullish on car charging.
Well, now that is conservation, or at least it's carbon footprint, reduction, getting rid of your gas guzzling vehicle and switching to something that's, energy efficient, like electric vehicles.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they cost a lot more than a regular car in terms of dollar per horsepower. I know someone who just dropped a ton of money on a new Tesla, but he loves it, so I don't see myself in getting a electric car anytime soon. I don't know. I'm just old school that way, but nothing's set in stone. Maybe I'll get one day.
I'm in the same situation. I'm, within the next year or so, probably have to replace one of my cars. It's getting to the 12 or 13 year mark, but I got a lot of miles out of my cars, but a lot of years. But it's hard to say. For example, if you look at the Tesla Model 3, it's not much bigger than a Honda Accord. You can buy the Honda Accord for probably $28,000. And the Tesla Model 3 is $43,000. It's about the same size car, right? Now it's going to be cheaper to operate, but it's still not the Honda Accord.
Yeah, but I think that's the trend. Everyone
Yep.
will start going that way.
It is. It absolutely is.
Best to be prepared for it. So that technically is conservation. So I don't know if we want to future-proof this conservation program like 10 years out and assume that 20% of the population is going to have electric cars.
Well, I would suggest, for example, that, again, I wanted you guys to come up with these, but I'll throw these out there and you put on the list if you like it. Why wouldn't you give somebody a rebate if they put a car charger in at home? So they showed you a bill of sale for an electric car and they showed you the receipt that they had an electrician install the device. Would you give them some rebate towards the installation of the device?
Yeah, good question.
Or would you give somebody a rebate if they just proved to you that they bought a car and they registered it and they live in our zip codes, in our territory? And how much would that be?
Yep. Yeah, because that's definitely not on the old plan.
Right. But personally, I would consider including it. That's my suggestion to the board. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you don't put it in there, but I'm throwing it on the table. Hey, what do you got to lose?
All right, well, great. All right, we're pushing the 3-hour mark here. Anyone have any last minute comments before we take a motion for adjourning? No? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
All right,
And I
well,
second.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you on the 17th with all your ideas. and more stats and knowledge, and we'll get this thing banged out.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, bye, see you all.
Thank you. Good night.